We're now court, so we'll make a start. Can I remind members that the meeting will be televised as we're in the Senate chamber today here. Can I remember members and those in the public gallery to switch off mobile phones as the committee meeting held in open session is recorded and mobiles may interfere with the recording system. Can I remember members of their obligation to declare any relevant financial or other interests in today's business? Can I also remember members to ensure that the volume of all tablet devices is off? The quickest way to do that is to press function on F8. Apologies. The clerk has received an apology from Michelle McElveen. Are members aware of any other apologies? Okay. I turn to the draft minutes of the meeting on the 13th of March. Can I seek members' agreement on those minutes? All agreed? Okay. Moving to matters arising, members will find the correspondence tracker at page 10. The tracker details the outstanding correspondence. Are members content to note?
Great.
Okay. At page 11, members will find a response from DCAL to the Finance and Personnel Committee's inquiry into flexible working in the public sector. DCAL has provided details in relation to its own procedures and those of arm's length bodies. You may wish to seek the views of the committee regarding whether do members wish to formally respond to the inquiry and what that response may be.
Chair, what we're looking for is, are members content that we forward the department's response to the committee, or does the committee itself want to make any response? The department's response is fairly fulsome with all the details from DCAL, so if members are content, we can forward that on to the Committee for Finance and Personnel. The committee, Culture, Arts and Leisure Committee, doesn't necessarily have anything to add to that if members are in agreement. Okay. So we'll move that one on.
See, page 22. At page 22, members will find correspondence from Sport NI. The clerk speak on this correspondence.
Yeah, we have correspondence from the to the chair of the committee from Sport NI around the correspondence they'd received from the journalists connected to the St Coleman's project issue that the committee had Sport NI up to brief them on the 6th of February. So really we're looking for members to note that correspondence. It's at page 22 in your packs. Are members content to note that for now?
Okay, members.
Okay. So there was some difficulties on this. I mean, I've just had a chance to read through it. Are we going to deal with it whenever Peter may?
This is part of the departmental briefing. We'll cover the St Coleman's project and also the DCAL management of larger capital projects, so it can be picked up then.
Well, I'm happy, Chair, to say we'll deal with it at the substantive bit, but I do want to refer to it.
Okay. Okay. Page 39, members will find the clerk's memo regarding the Common Select Committee inquiry into the future of the BBC. Ian Clark.
Members will recall that during the committee's visit to London, they engaged with the Select Committee for Culture, Media and Sport, which had embarked on an inquiry into the future of the BBC. We put out to some of the committee's key stakeholders a request for inputs into that inquiry. Now, we got responses from the BBC Trust and also NI Screen. BBC and the BBC Trust essentially sent us through the submissions that they sent to the Westminster Committee's inquiry. NI Screen has also sent their submission to the Westminster inquiry, but they specifically looked at a lot of local issues that the BBC Trust and the BBC didn't, mainly focusing on the idea that they wanted more independent production to come out of the BBC licence fund. Essentially what they're suggesting is 45 to 50% of the money the BBC has to spend on programme making should go to external producers. That would be up considerably from the targets the BBC has. They also made considerable reference to the fact that there aren't hard targets for BBC production in Northern Ireland, and they wanted to see things like that being introduced. It's very similar to what NI Screen had said around the licensing for Channel 3 and Channel 4, essentially trying to boost local production and build local capacity. So they refer to that quite considerably in their submission. And really what we're looking for members to think about is how they might want to respond, whether they want to reinforce the local specific points that NI Screen has made, or if members have other things that they want to say. As I said, the committee at Westminster is in receipt of all of those submissions. And what might be useful is to find out whether or not they intend to have NI Screen or any locally based organisation to give oral evidence. They've started their oral evidence, and what I might suggest to members is that if I contact that committee to find out just exactly who else they plan to take oral evidence from, including if they may be taking oral evidence from NI Screen. Members may want to take this away and consider it, but as I said, the BBC Trust and BBC responses are very much UK-wide. They're very much focused on the bigger picture. The NI Screen is much more locally focused and therefore picks up a lot of the issues that the committee has written on before, as I say, specifically around the Channel 3 and Channel 4 licences. So, Chair, it's really for members to decide how they want to take this forward.
Okay. Wait for the Chair to say this, but I would like to speak.
I think I was going to seek members' agreement that the clerks would draft a response to the inquiry, formal agreement at next week's meeting.
Well, I'm happy to go, but can I say, Chair, I am interested in the monopoly situation that the BBC has in Northern Ireland, that when you take it on a UK-wide basis, they have got strong competitors in the form of ITN or whatever, so there's balance. But within Northern Ireland, they tend to set the news agenda with everybody else following. And I think that there is a question about balance, about what they decide to run as a story in the news is what the story is, whereas there may be other things. And I do think that there is a requirement for increased local accountability. So that includes both editorial. It's not to direct what the editorial content should be, but there should be balance. There should be sufficient balance coming from other channels to give them a run for their money. And I think that small regional assemblies or small regional areas do have that issue. So if we could put that in as part of whatever we're going to do, I would be very pleased to take that.
Chair, the NI Screen submission actually also picks up on some structural changes they're suggesting with the BBC that they feel could be pursued on different levels. One would be more input from the devolved institutions. That would have to be very carefully thought about so that the BBC's independence would still be maintained. They also talked about greater representation or more effective structures of representation on the BBC Trust, specifically for Northern Ireland, and also more specific representation for Northern Ireland at senior management level as well. Because again, it's as Mr McCrae has said, they don't feel that the Northern Ireland voice is necessarily being heard right at the heart of the corporation. There were also a lot of references in their submission to being able to work well with BBC Northern Ireland on localised issues. They specifically referenced the Irish Language and Ulster Scots Broadcast Funds being an excellent example of that. But they said where they were having to work more generally, where the central BBC had an input, there was very little interest in a local agenda and local partnership. So I think that's a way of picking up what Mr McCrae has said as well.
I'm certainly supportive of that specific bit that's brought up, that we know that NI Screen feels that there should be more local content that could be networked. I think that's absolutely right. But I just would like to say I think this committee might want to consider the dominant position. The BBC and all of the results are top for everything in Northern Ireland, whereas in the United Kingdom, there's more of a balance, and I think that there is a regional requirement to say how, with the proper grounds of probity, how would you make sure that they are properly held to account, and that because they have a fundamental impact on our society. So if we could put that in our addressing, as well as the points that have been brought up at NI Screen. I think that would be good.
Chair, if I bring back a response to
next
Mr.
week.
next week, trying to capture what's been discussed.
Okay. Now we come with, there's a decal briefing on the PSC and Audit Office reports on decal's management of major capital projects, and Audit Office report on Sports NI's project management and oversight of the St Coleman's project. The first briefing is from decal and the PSC and Audit Office reports on decal's management of major capital projects and the Audit Office report on Sports NI management of the St Coleman's project. Members will find the clerk's memo at page 140 and decal's briefing paper in the table pack at page 3. Other supporting material is in the pack. Do you want to say anything about this?
Chair, just to draw members' attention to the decal paper, which is in the table pack. It's from page 3 in the table pack. Members should have that in front of them. So if members want to make sure they have that.
I requested at a couple of meetings ago a letter from this committee to the PAC because they had made suggestions about fraud and such like, and I wondered if they had a chance to respond.
Chair, that's referenced in the clerk's memo. The specific phrase was rigged and manipulated. PAC drew that opinion based on a number of points. The department, as probably will be brought out in the briefing today, we're disputing the factual basis for that it is more opinion than necessarily with evidence to support it. The PAC is seeking further papers on that, so isn't in a position to make a final comment on it yet. They're still waiting for further papers on that.
Have they responded in written form to us?
No. They still need to have these further papers that they've asked from the department, from DFP.
I just would like to say, if you make a statement that go, what was it, rigged and
manipulated.
If you go rigged and manipulated on the basis of incomplete information, that's not a good thing. You cannot make statements like that, and I just think that we should just ask them when would we be likely, when will they have received the papers for which they probably do it, and could they highlight the information that they used to make the original statement?
Chair, if I can just say, it is referenced in the clerk's memo. I'm just going to the exact page where that is. Bear with me a second. Rigged and manipulated. If you go to 146 in the pack, in the heavy print, it essentially gives the reasons why the PAC said that, and in the DFP memorandum of response, both DFP and decal challenged the basis of that as being opinion more than necessarily factual. I think part of it is the missing documentation from the tender process as well, but I'm sure that the department will be able to pick up on that.
Well, I would just like, rather than have it in words, I don't mind whatever the answer is, but I think that they should be in a position to respond. They've made a statement, rigged and manipulated, and they ought to be able to say on what information they were relying upon to make that statement. Or if they are going to say we're going to get further papers, surely we could have that in writing, just that this is how they're going to deal with it.
Chair, sorry, there is a memo at page 257 in the pack, essentially saying that they're waiting for these papers, but it's nothing more than that, I'm afraid. We will follow that up with PAC committee to see what the timescale is. But they had anticipated, I think, having them already, but we're not aware that those have been received. But the timescale was quite tight.
If you then to come back.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair.
Okay.
Morgan, can I declare an interest as a member of Newry District Council from the St Coleman's project with information? Thank you.
Okay. Can I welcome the following officials to the meeting? Peter May, Permanent Secretary, Deborah Brown, Director of Finance and Corporate Services, and Sinead McCartan, Head of Sports Branch. Can I advise members and officials that the briefing will be covered by Hansard? And can I invite yourselves to make your opening statement? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. We welcome the opportunity to come before the committee this morning to address two sets of issues. one relating to the Audit Office and PAC reports into major capital projects, and the second into the Audit Office report on St Colmans. While the issues raised are in many ways distinct, there are overlapping aspects, but I'm going to start by addressing the PAC and Audit Office reports on major capital projects. We've welcomed the report and accepted the recommendations, acknowledging some aspects fall to DFP rather than to DCAL. I'm confident that those recommendations which fall to DCAL will be implemented by April 2014. 7 of the 9 Audit Office recommendations have already been completed, with the remaining 2 partially implemented, and 7 of the 8 PAC recommendations have been fully implemented, with 1 partially implemented. Now, we recognise implementation isn't a one-off process. It's critical we continue to follow through, that we learn when things do not go perfectly, and we ensure the spirit of these recommendations remains alive in both DCAL and its arm's-length bodies. I don't intend to cover all the ground that the PAC has already covered, but I do want to draw out some of the key changes that have been made as a result of these 2 reports. Firstly, DCAL requires all capital projects using a proportionate approach to adhere to the best practice project delivery arrangements set out in the Achieving Excellence in Construction initiative. Second, DCAL and its ALBs have changed their relationship with CPD. Our engagement is now in line with best practice and means CPD is involved earlier in the drafting of business cases and in the procurement process, that they attend all relevant meetings relating to procurement, and they continue to work with the project during the construction phase. Thirdly, the Department is working to ensure everybody has got the message. In December, we drew together senior representatives from our arm's-length bodies to set out the conclusions from the PAC report and discuss its implications. CPD attended and provided presentations, and in addition, we're going to provide training to relevant staff, both in the Department and our arm's-length bodies, to ensure the right skills and awareness are in place. Fourthly, we've taken steps to complete a range of outstanding post-project evaluations, recognising that on occasion it's been difficult to get information from third parties. We've now cleared the vast majority of overdue post-project evaluations. Fifth, we've changed our practices in relation to requiring the holding of information, so 10 years will be the period that any tender information is held after a procurement exercise. So in summary, on the PAC and Audit Office reports on major capital projects, I would highlight that the changes we have made have been in relation to systems, to roles and responsibilities, to training and to culture. Turning now to St Colmans, I know you've already heard from the Chief Executive of Sport NI. I would just highlight initially that this project commenced in July 2010 at about the time that the other major capital projects were coming to a close, and well before the Audit Office began its investigation into those. So that timing may explain why some of the same problems were experienced for St Colmans as had been in the major capital projects. The question I particularly want to address in relation to St Colmans is how I, as accounting officer, how this committee and others can have confidence that similar difficulties will not arise in future. It's clear that the way the St Colmans project was managed was unacceptable in a range of ways, as has been drawn out by the Audit Office. While, as accounting officer, I and my predecessor in DCAL have overall responsibility, it's also clear that a significant part of the problems in relation to this project rested with Sport NI. It was of particular concern that in this case DCAL was not informed of the issues with the project until far too late, contrary to long-standing requirements. The committee will understand the question of how you can be sure this won't happen in future is one that is a critical question. It's one that's difficult to answer with certainty. But there are a range of factors which I believe can inform such judgments. Firstly, Sport NI has accepted responsibility and has already implemented the 4 Audit Office recommendations in relation to St Colmans. They've rehearsed both to this committee and the Department the lessons they've learnt from the problems that arose and how they will ensure they don't happen again. And I think it's important to note they've done that in what I consider to be an open and transparent way. As I mentioned earlier, culture matters significantly. The Department has itself seen a change in the nature of the communication with Sport NI in relation to issues relating to governance. There is now a greater openness and a greater willingness to notify and speak to the Department, to check out whether an issue arises which requires the Department to intervene, to draw attention to any departures from project timescales or costs, and to operate in a more collaborative way. In taking those steps, I think it's important that we recognise that there should be no obscuring of roles. For projects within their delegated limits, Sport NI remain responsible and accountable. Where a project like St Colmans requires the approval of the Department, the conditions of any approval, when granted, must be observed. In relation to the problems that emerged from St Coleman's and before the Audit Office initiated its report, Sport NI had put in place a governance review by SIPFA in 2012, which made a wide range of recommendations. A follow-up of that review demonstrated good progress has been made, and Sport NI now report in respect of that review that all but one of the 34 recommendations have been fully implemented. And that one outstanding recommendation requires time for the risk management process within the organisation to properly be embedded before it can be sensibly reviewed. The Department has developed its approach to governance, placing responsibility on the Board of Sport NI, and indeed all of our arm's-length bodies, to provide a level of assurance that they're exercising oversight of the executive team and that returns from the executive team are full and complete so far as they are aware. We have regular accountability meetings, we attend audit committee meetings and have sight of board papers and minutes, and they all reinforce the overall impression of each of our bodies. Through the audit committee attendance, we also have sight of internal audit reports, and we have a regular peer review of internal audit of each arm's-length body. In the case of Sport NI, pending a structural review, the Chief Executive is procuring internal audit from outside the organisation for 2014-15. Importantly, and in this case there is a clear linkage to the other major capital projects, St Coleman's drew out that where there are multiple funders, this generates particular issues in relation to roles and responsibilities. Implementation of the Audit Office recommendations means that where multiple funders are involved, clear processes will be followed to ensure each sign off at all important stages of the project. Mr Chair, I wanted to give a reasonably full introduction to set out the nature of the different ways that we've addressed the recommendations and to highlight that it's not simply a change in processes, but also about ensuring that people have the right skills, that organisations have the right culture, and that roles and responsibilities are clear. I know you and committee members will have a number of questions, and I and my colleagues will do our best to respond to those.
Okay, thank you very much. In relation to the capital projects, the Department denies that there was any rigging or manipulation surrounding the tendering. For the reconstruction of the Lyric, how does the Department describe what occurred?
The position that I adopted when in front of the Public Accounts Committee last summer was to say that I had not seen evidence to support the allegation of rigging or manipulation. And if there is such evidence, then obviously we would take that very seriously and refer it to the appropriate authority, because rigging is essentially, in my terms, an allegation of criminal conspiracy. So, we would want to make sure that if there was any breach of procurement law in those terms, that was properly investigated. What is clear, and I rehearsed with the Public Accounts Committee, is that there were failings in relation to the Lyric procurement. The fact that the tenders themselves do not exist because they were destroyed by the consultants managing the process is unfortunate. There is a tender report which exists and has been properly reviewed by a range of people, but the actual tenders themselves don't exist. I think that the conflict of interest procedures that the Lyric had adopted were not sufficient. There were some conflict of interest procedures, but they weren't sufficient, and changes have been made in that respect. So there were some things that weren't done right, but that is still short of any evidence that I have seen that would support the allegation of rigging or manipulation.
Okay. Well, normally consultants are the experts in the field. Obviously, do you feel that those consultants didn't do their job properly?
Well, I'm not aware of any evidence that they didn't do their job properly in terms of managing the procurement process. What they didn't do was to retain the actual tenders. That followed what I think is quite common practice within the private sector, which is different from the public sector, and clearly they ought to have been required to hold the tenders for at least 7 years, and we've said for 10 years now, just to be sure, in line with the practice that the public sector adopts. So that was an oversight, that was not required of the consultants. Okay.
In relation to St Coleman's, considering the redevelopment of the sports stadiums, can the Department give any assurances that similar issues will not occur again?
Well, I think that's very much the critical question, and I think that in my opening remarks I've tried to address some of the factors that we take into account. So we look very much at the overall governance arrangements, at the nature of the engagement that we have with Sport NI, that the board of Sport NI have with its executive. We look at the procedures that they have in place. They have changed both their risk management approach and their fraud management policy, and they've ensured that the organisation has gone through training on that fraud response arrangements. And I do believe that Sport NI have understood the nature of the difficulties that were faced from the St Coleman's project and have acted in order to ensure there isn't a repetition. But as I said in my opening remarks, assurance and governance is not a one-step process where you say it's all done. It's a continual vigilance that is required, and the department will be playing its part to ensure that it remains vigilant in relation to the arrangements that are in place, both in Sport NI and indeed in our other arm's-length bodies.
Okay. Some members want to ask a question. Mr. Hope, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, and thank you very much for your presentation. Just having read the reports and the recommendations the Department have made, Mr. May, can I ask you, do you still believe, as Permanent Secretary of a Government Department in Northern Ireland, that CPD, Central Procurement Directorate, is still the best way, most efficient and effective way to procure in the civil service?
Well, that's a big question, taking me away outside the detail of the reports. I think I would answer that by saying that that CPD provide the professional procurement support for all Northern Ireland civil service departments currently. We have sought to ensure that we have proper working relationships with them, underpinned by a service level agreement, which we monitor on an ongoing basis. We believe that in relation to the projects that we're running, we are getting a good service from CPD. I think it's hard for me to make a judgment about whether there is a better possible way of delivering procurement than CPD. I don't have a model in my back pocket that would easily replace it, and it would be a major change for the civil service and would need very significant thought and consideration before going down that path.
Yeah. So you believe you get a good service, but the question was, do you think and believe it's the most efficient and effective way for taxpayers' money to be spent on procuring services, product or capital investment for the civil service in Northern Ireland?
And I appreciate I didn't fully answer your question. What I said was that I didn't have an alternative model that would clearly be better in my back pocket, and on that basis I'm extremely happy to continue to use the service that is being provided by CPD.
See, I'm not sure how you can be extremely happy, to be honest, when you read reports like this. And surely permanent secretaries across government in Northern Ireland, including the head of civil service, should be looking at this particular issue, because I'm not sure it does provide the most effective and efficient way for taxpayers' money to be spent in procuring services for Northern Ireland, and I think the civil service should be looking at that.
I think that the vast majority of the recommendations in both of these reports do not show failings on the part of CPD. They are significantly failings on the part either of the department or one of its arm's-length bodies, and that's unfortunate, and I'm before this committee to explain that, but I think it's only fair to recognise that.
Okay. Well, if we look at recommendation 2, inaccurate cost estimates undermine effective appraisal and achievement of value for money, and public bodies must therefore do more to ensure the cost estimates are realistic. Yeah?
Yes.
This is from your department, yeah?
And the issue there was that when the major capital projects were being developed to an outline business case stage in the period sort of 2002 through to 2007, some of those outline business cases were being finalised on the basis of incomplete information. CPD were actually not being involved sufficiently early in the process that their expertise and guidance could be offered. And one of the changes we've made is to involve them earlier in the process to try and make sure we have more robust figures at outline business case stage. I think... Sorry.
So go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
And in terms of the whole process, and following up on the point, one of the points the Chair made, you know, does this open up Sport NI and the Department or the Civil Service to potential legal action? Because of that recommendation not being carried through, in that people might well say, well, what actually was delivered wasn't what was put out there as a tender for people to respond to. In fact, if you look at the debacle that was in Coleman's, it was considerably a greater spend than it needed to be. Yes?
Well, I'm not sure specifically which area you were referring to around the legal action, but in relation to St Coleman's, the amount that was spent...
Well, the point I'm making, just to clarify, is if there are companies who put in a tender which is a greater amount than the successful company, and then when it comes to the actual delivery of the project, the valuations, that tender process which rendered that company the successful company, or companies, when the competitors are ruled out because their tender was more expensive. That's the point I'm making.
I understand. Thank you for that. I think in relation to St Coleman's, the amount that was spent was the amount that was budgeted. The difference was that not as much was delivered as had been in the original specification. So there was a move from 8 lanes to 6 lanes, for example, and 1 or 2 other changes to the scope of the project. That could give rise to the same issue. I'm just explaining the background. Clearly, any firm has the legal right to take action if it wishes to. None have done so in this particular case, but we are all mindful, and that's the reason that we seek to follow procurement law and procurement guidance to the full extent of the risks of legal action, whether that action be sustainable or not.
I think, Mr May, with respect, in terms of the track being reduced from 8 lanes to 6, in terms of making the statement you just made, in terms of extra money was spent in terms of the tender, when the lanes are reduced by 2 and it can't be used for international competition because of that, I think that's a very serious issue, and it shows that the tender process in this particular project, and in this case, did not work at all, and it actually ended up costing the taxpayer and the ratepayer probably more money.
Well, I've accepted that there were failings in this case. I think the main failing was around the specification in the outline business case and the attribution of costs in relation to that. I'm not clear that there was an actual failure in the tender process that means the wrong person was given the contract. I've seen no evidence to suggest that.
Can I then ask, in terms of because I think this is key given the evidence you've given us this morning in terms of the post-project evaluations. I think I read in the report that there, at least one project that was concerned in the department, there was a lack of expertise around the delivery of post-project evaluations. In relation to the 3 stadia, which are huge expenditures for the department,
Yes.
coming up, will that post-project evaluation expertise be available to the department to ensure that issues such as this in Coleman's are not replicated? Because all the recommendations are fine and it will make the civil service more robust, and your department in Sport NI more robust, and I'll come on to Sport NI in a moment. But will that can you assure this committee that expertise will be there for these post-project evaluations?
In relation to the 3 stadia specifically, yes, absolutely, we will ensure that proper post-project evaluations are completed. Post-project evaluation is normally some time after the completion of the build. I don't actually have the timescales in my head, but we could write to the committee and let you know when they're envisaged so that you could be informed of that.
And finally, Chair, can I ask, in relation to Sport NI, which is obviously an arm's length body of your department, was it the case that all of the audit committee members and the audit committee of Sport NI were trained to the prerequisite standard to carry out their duties?
That's a question that I'm not sure I'm able to answer factually today, and perhaps I could write to the committee with the answer to that.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. And can I then, just following on from that, ask you for your assurance that if they weren't, that will indeed be the case in the future?
Well, I can give an assurance that the audit committee of both Sport NI and indeed our other arm's length bodies have received any appropriate training now. What I don't know is what was in place at the time that St Coleman's kicked off in 2010, 2011. So that's what I just wanted to check.
I think it was universally accepted across the parties, and the Sport NI and the audit office were in front of this committee, that there were concerns, we had real concerns, the practices and procedures that were put in place, quite frankly, we were appalled to hear they weren't in place, which meant that the situation around the investment at St Coleman's and the project there led to the outcome that it did.
No, I absolutely understand the concerns that the committee has in relation to St Coleman's and more widely, and I'll write to the committee about that specific point on Audit Committee members at the time.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thanks very much for coming to address the committee this morning. Just want to go back to some that Mr Humphreys has raised on the tendering process for the Lyric. Could you evaluate what you see as a tender? So when a tender process is put in place and contractors come in and declare an interest that they might be interested in tendering for a job, they're all given a specific job entitlement, the exact same, where there's a fair and open and transparent way where all the tendering can be processed.
Yes.
Would you agree that this has happened for the Lyric?
Yes,
Okay.
I think it was clear that it was.
Yes, and there was a gateway health check done, which did say that there was a robust tendering process followed.
Okay. And then can you explain to me, as a layperson, why it says that the private sector consultants who produced the tender evaluation report destroyed the tendering documentation very promptly after the tender evaluation meeting?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's quite common practice in the private sector for tenders not to be retained for any length of time after a procurement has been completed. We ought to have stipulated that it was a condition or requirement on the consultants to hold that information, and we didn't do that in this case, and that was an error.
So do you think there's an open door then for the other contractors who had put in their tendering for it, that there's an open door for them to be able to take legal action against the department?
Well, it wouldn't in the first instance be against the department, but they would have had the opportunity to take legal action at the time if they had any concerns about the process. Deborah has mentioned the Gateway Review. There are a number of other factors that provide some assurance. They don't provide complete assurance because not all of the paperwork exists. So there was a broadly based assessment panel in place. It wasn't simply representatives of the Lyric. It was much more broadly based than that. There are a wide range of individuals and professional skills on that panel. CPD had been involved in the procurement process while they weren't at the meeting that determined the outcome of the tender. They had confidence in the tender process. There was an internal audit report which found the overall approach to the tendering was in line with best practice. And then there was the Gateway health check, which said it had found a robust tendering process. So all of those provide some assurance. I agree they don't go the whole way, but I think they are relevant.
Okay, so I don't understand a tendering process, but when I'm reading this here, it indicates that a submission was further adjusted and that others weren't further adjusted. But there's no proof or follow-up for others to come in to look at that because documentation is being destroyed.
Well, in relation to that point, which I think goes to the scaffolding costs that were attributed to the programme, the Public Accounts Committee did ask for further information, and they were provided with a series of emails that showed all firms were asked about their scaffolding costs and shown the replies to those firms. And I know that's a matter that is in front of the Public Accounts Committee in terms of that information. So that information does exist in those emails and has been provided.
Okay, thank you on that. Just then going on to the St Coleman's college project, and you spoke about how Sport NI come and came to the committee in an open and transparent way. Do you think that it was open and transparent when the Chief Executive said that should reflect on an apology to a journalist?
Well, I mean, I think that's very much a matter for the Chief Executive of Sport NI. What I was describing was the way in which they'd explained the fact that they took responsibility for the problems that had existed in St Coleman's and the steps that they had taken in relation to the 4 Audit Office recommendations. I wasn't being specific to their attendance at your committee. I was also referring to the engagement we've had with them around the follow-up to St Coleman's.
Okay. Any of the recommendations that has come, was any of them previously made recommendations to the Sport NI, were they made before and weren't followed in a different inquiry?
I think in relation to the 4 specific Audit Office recommendations, I'm not clear that they have been brought forward before, but I think what may be at the root of your question relates to a previous incident relating to Ulster Camogie, where Sport and I did not follow the fraud policy properly, and it's certainly true that in this case, in relation to St Coleman's, once again, Sport and I did not follow the fraud policy correctly. And I've described the fact that they have both put in place a new and better fraud policy, but also ensured training right through the organisation, because it's absolutely critical for us and for others that we should have assurance that that would not happen again.
Okay, and just as an arm's length body, Sport NI didn't know the effect that the removal of the high jump from the project at St Coleman's College, what effect that would have, or the seriousness around it. Do you think that's acceptable, as Sport NI being one of the leading funders?
Well, I think clearly it's not acceptable, and I think that the executive team, when they were before you, explained that and recognised that that wasn't acceptable, that they hadn't taken the level of oversight that was needed over that decision, and that had led to some bad decisions in terms of the use of public money.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Mr. Hilditch, please.
Thanks, Chair. Good to see you there. You mentioned, Peter, some changes within with CPD in relation to consultants and third parties, and you had some experience of difficulty getting information. In the overall picture of where we are with capital projects and the experiences to date, and I have to say I've sat in a few project teams involved in decal issues over a number of years now, and thank God I'm not at it all the time, because it is a headache. There's absolutely no doubt about it. I don't envy your positions at all at times, you know. But is there not? There's a bigger picture in relation to sort of 2 areas, and it's how consultants are managed at the end of the day. And my own personal experience of working with consultants isn't great. It's hard work at times, and it really does take a robust system to manage that. And probably the other area where I sort of got some concern at this is the treatment of whistleblowing in the civil service, and obviously specific here to decal. So those were the 2 areas I was concerned about, and just looking at reassurance that as we move forward and we can't go back on things, we are where we are with the thing, that there's robustness in the management of consultancy and third parties as the department moves forward.
Thank you for the question. I think you've highlighted 2 very important areas. In relation to consultants, clearly consultants are generally brought in to provide expertise to a project or programme where that doesn't exist in-house. But there needs to be a sufficient intelligent customer role within the department to make sure that expertise is being managed properly in line with, and the contract is properly set up in the first place, that it's not open-ended in nature. That is an ongoing challenge for all departments, and not least for decal. But I think that we do have robust mechanisms in place. We seek to avoid the use of consultants wherever we can, but there are times when it's appropriate and necessary, particularly...
in this one in particular, there was about 4 different consultants engaged through the course from various levels. So
it is true that I don't know if you're referring to the lyric where there were a number of different consultants. Right. If you involve consultants at different stages, then that can make it harder to hold them to account. But sometimes you need different sorts of skills to be brought in by different organisations, and it's not necessarily the answer to get just one organisation to deliver.
And consultancy is one of our biggest businesses in Northern Ireland, probably at the end of the day. But they're out there trying to ensure that they're getting the work, and yes. I'm not saying they're cutting corners or they're changing things to suit but there is a difficulty with the management of them. That's how I see it at the moment, you know.
Well, it's something that we certainly work hard to try to overcome. I don't know, Deborah, if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, and obviously we involve CPD, in the management of the consultants, and obviously the issue is in how the contract is set up from the outset, and making sure they're being monitored carefully against that. And if there are any issues, they're being addressed at the point at which they occur, and it's not being left to much later on in the process, where it's much more difficult to take appropriate action.
Just from personal experience, I can see the difficulty they are working with third parties. outside the department, there's no doubt about that. And on whistleblowers,
Well, we've done quite a lot of work in relation to whistleblowers to make sure we've got an appropriate policy and that we have everybody trained properly in how to take that forward. And I think that, an example like St Coleman's, where there was a failure in relation to the fraud policy, just emphasises the importance of that. We have, I believe, robust processes in place. We have used them where whistleblowers have come forward, and I think we've used them effectively. But as I said before, this is something you have to continue to work at, and it's important to get the right balance to ensure that you protect whistleblowers, but also there's no presumption of guilt against those who allegations are made against. So it is about making sure that we have a process that is fair to all of those concerned.
Okay, Mr. McCrae.
Thank you. Can you explain to me why a representative of CPD nor from DCAL attended the tender evaluation meeting with regard to the Lyric Theatre?
Well, I think that the date of the meeting was changed and that CPD were not able to field a representative. That practice has now changed, and we've made it clear, and CPD have accepted that they would always attend such meetings going forward. I think the department had not seen its presence as being critical. The department isn't necessarily, isn't the procurement expert in relation to that. So it would have had an oversight role, but it wouldn't have had the expertise to assess whether it was being done properly or not at that time.
So what do you make of the fact from page 44 of the NIO report on the tender evaluation process, where there are I don't know if you've got the same packs that I have, but it's page 144 in our pack.
Right. Well, I've got the Audit Office report into major capital projects here, certainly.
Figure 11 from page 44, brackets 54 of the NIO report summary of the tender evaluation process. Figure 11.
Yep. Okay.
So I'm looking at this. It goes adjusted tender price. And I notice, contractor B, the tender report incorrectly states the adjusted price was 10 million, where in actual fact it was 11 million. And in fact, all of the apart from the winning contractor, all of the adjusted tender prices were wrong.
Okay.
So I just wonder how you can do a tender report or be involved in sums of that money. You didn't have a representative present, and neither did CPD. And that's what this entire process looks like as being incorrect.
Well, I think that the fact that some of the numbers within the various tenders didn't add up to the number that was at the bottom is something that is not that uncommon, and it would normally be. It's important that there's a level playing field, as it were, and that the right price is recognised before the evaluation is done. And that was taken forward in this case by the consultants running the procurement process. Clearly, I accept it would have been better if CPD had been present at the relevant meeting. But my understanding is that these sorts of adjustments are not unusual.
The NIO noted that there was variances allowed for scaffolding,
Yes.
but there were similar variances allowed for staff, but a similar approach was not taken with regard to staff. The allegation here is that £347,915 was removed from the Gilbert Ash tender, but that adjustment was not allowed. That opportunity is not given to other people. I mean, just looking at it in the first case, that does seem to be a rather significant adjustment, given that it's also offsetting the £413,000 taken out for scaffolding. These were the numbers that actually turned the decision on who was going to win the contract at the tender evaluation stage. It just seems to me really strange that such large numbers were moving around and nobody was saying, I'm concerned about this.
Well, I think that any adjustments that were being made would have been fully rehearsed with the panel that was set up. And as I've explained, that was a broadly based panel, I think, of 7 people representing a wide range of different interests, including relevant professional skills. So that I think is the sort of background in relation to how that would have happened. It's not that it would have happened in a way that was invisible. Clearly, if CPD had been present, then they would have been able to validate that in a way that they're not now able to. So that's part of the problem that exists here.
While CPD are useful for giving you advice, the department would still be the central funder?
Yes, the money in this case, I think, was coming from the Arts Council, but yes, the Arts Council and the department together were joint investment decision makers. The department would have heard the explanations. But the point I was making was they wouldn't necessarily have had the professional expertise to know whether they were the right explanations or not, which is why the role of CPD is important in this case.
So is there any point in having the department there?
I think that there's a purpose in being there, but it's not sufficient.
I just think that we talk about expertise in managing large capital projects, and we'll come on to the St Coleman's and those, but surely the department must have some expertise in evaluating tenders and how the money is spent, given that it ultimately comes from them.
Well, and in a whole range of different areas, the department will evaluate tenders itself using CPD advice for projects that it's running. The point is that there is a very wide range of different capital projects, and the department wouldn't necessarily have, or doesn't have, expertise in how to build a theatre or how to build a new sports stadium. It's brought in expertise for that purpose. So it's important that we don't set ourselves up to be the experts in a very wide range of fields where it's not going to be possible to be. When the experts do exist in those fields and are present at the...
Something non-technical there. The PAC report says, citing in paragraph 38 of the report, in relation to rigged and manipulated, this is a statement, just on your response on it. Yeah. The preferred bidder provided a donation of £150,000 to the Lyric Theatre. Yeah. Was that donation acceptable or not acceptable?
The conflict of interest procedures were not sufficient in this case. I think that there is there is evidence of a clear separation in terms of how the Lyric sought that donation, and they also got a donation from one of the other unsuccessful bidders in this case, from the team that were actually running the procurement. But nonetheless, there was not a recognition of how that might look in the public mind, and perception is important in these cases. So there are further developed conflict of interest procedures that are in place now.
So accept your point that it wasn't followed and it should be followed, but having had a chance to evaluate this situation now, is the department confident that there was no inappropriate relationship in relation to the £150,000 with regard to the awarding of the tender?
I have no evidence to suggest any impropriety.
The PAC are suggesting that there is some evidence of impropriety because it's citing unacceptable departures from established good practice, and it's given these lists. So I'm asking you the question because it reflects the professional and public integrity of some very senior people within the Lyric Theatre, people that have been doing a very good job, that their integrity is called into question. Would you support the integrity of the people within the Lyric Theatre, or do you think that still needs to be investigated further?
I think if there is any further evidence that comes to light that casts doubt on either that particular donation or on the tender process, then that should be investigated further. But in the absence of that information, I'm not clear what further could be brought forward.
Are you investigating it further? Not
at this stage. I'm awaiting, if there is further information, that's why we've asked the Public Accounts Committee if they have any information that they can draw to our attention.
The last point just on this issue, that the PAC make the statement, despite £413,000 being stripped out of one of the tenders, the cost was later paid in full.
Well, having removed all scaffolding costs from all 5 of the bids, it is that was not to say that scaffolding would not be needed for the project. the purpose of removing it was that the belief was that different bidders had used very different bases for including the costs in relation to scaffolding. Now, what I understand that the fact that the original cost that Gilbert Ash had offered was paid in full makes it look as though, because their cost was higher than others, that was in some way inappropriate. I'm not clear that that's the case. I don't have the detail about how the scaffolding cost was decided after the tender process.
Okay. So, just moving on to St Coleman's then, the snub of the presentation to us from the NIO was that there were three failings. One was that the tender or the requirements were completely put together. There was a weakness in that submission. The second was that the journalist that made inquiries was not responded to and was essentially correct in what he had said. And the final thing was that the internal audit procedures failed, I think, on 3 occasions. So that's the nub of what's wrong with that submission. Who was the first person in the department to realise that there was a problem with the St Coleman's bid?
The issues were raised with us in March of 2012. I'm not sure who the person would have been who they were notified to, but it would have come through, I'm sure, to...
Yeah. The whistleblower sent the letter into the department as well.
But there was I'm sorry, I can't remember the name, which is why I've got to ask, but there was a statement in the NIO's position that said it was whenever it went to the department that it may not have been the accounting officer, but I'm just asking whether it was Sinead or Deborah or somebody who was, that they come back and said, no, there is a problem here.
Well, the department, once it received the whistleblowing letter, took a series of steps in order to make sure that that was being properly examined and considered. By the time had the audit office not been going to do its own report, we would have put our own internal audit in because we had not been satisfied with the completeness of the responses we'd received.
So you've said that arm's length bodies and others are going to get proper training. What is the issue? What will they be trained in relation to internal audit being asked to investigate their boss?
Well, there are clear procedures where any internal audit function should report appropriately to the Audit and Risk Committee, which has independent board members, an independent board member in chief.
This particular lady was being asked to investigate the chair of the Audit Committee, and the NIAO said, or the report, but the NIAO said that this is this would be unfair pressure on anybody. So I'm taking there, but so there must be some procedures in place that your department is going to take in place to say, where you feel there is a conflict of interest from an internal audit, here is the procedure that you go through it.
Well, what had happened in this case is that reports had been done, including one, as you say, by the chair of the Audit and Risk Committee, and I think essentially the wrong order was followed in terms of internal audit should have been invited to do work in the first instance rather than any board member being invited to look at the issues. But yes, there are clear escalation procedures in place that means that this situation would not occur again, because this would be reported to an Audit and Risk Committee and the department would at that stage ensure.
There are two things that I would like to be saying. I don't know if this is what you've done. One is you need to disseminate to all and sundry where a person is asked to do something that they don't think it's right. It has to be referred to a higher authority. It shouldn't be seen as a whistleblowing from an internal auditor to say, I can't do it. It needs to be understood this is the proper way of dealing with these issues. And I'd ask whether that has been put out. And the second thing is this meeting that you're talking about training everybody on. How detailed is the training in that issue?
Well, the training is in relation to whistleblowing and fraud rather than in relation to internal audit. There are different training for professionals in the internal audit field. In relation to Sport NI specifically, I know the Chief Executive had already moved to that internal audit would report directly to her, and as I explained in my opening remarks, she is also seeking to procure from externally, from an external provider, the internal audit function in 1415, while she does a structural review within the organisation.
I have no remit. This committee has no remit with her. We can talk to you.
Yes. And sorry, I'm just explaining some of the background here as to why you can have some assurance that the same would not happen.
Mr. McKevitt brought up the point that we asked the Chief Executive at this committee about an apology, which she was reflecting upon but is not yet given. It is my impression that she has not accepted yet that Sport NI, or NI Sport, which way around is it? Sport NI, so it's NI Screen, Sport NI, right, Sport NI, have not really taken on board what they've said. And I look here, and I raised it with the Chair at the start of the meeting, there's a series of emails coming from the journalist asking for information about what was done, and the response to most of them is that this information requested is exempt, given that it's privileged and whatever. Given that the journalist, and I haven't met the journalist, but given that he was largely correct in a lot of his issues, there needs to be a proper acceptance that it is right and proper for people to ask questions about procurement issues, particularly when they go wrong. And I'm not sure that that message has genuinely got through to the arm's length body, and the only person I can talk to about is you. And what I'm asking you about is, how do you go and deal with these issues of appropriate internal audit reviews? Because let's be honest, it failed 3 times.
Well, the internal audit failed. There was only one internal audit report, but there were three separate reports within Sport NI, none of which were viewed to be sufficient. I accept that point.
Not only not sufficient, failed.
Well, they were inadequate, yes.
That's civil service speak. They failed because there was a complete disaster of how it could. And you look at it, you say, the system should have worked, the systems didn't work. You, as the accounting officer, need to ensure that there is a chain of command, because it will end back with you. And I told Antoinette this when she says, if this happens again, no excuses, no whatever. She is in really serious trouble, her organisations, but so, Peter, is the department. You need to reassure us that you're going to deal with that. And secondly, we need a policy about how we can be more open with people that are asking for information. We cannot come back and say, we are not going to give you any information, particularly when they've been adjudged by independent people to have been largely correct in their early assessments. You need to manage that.
On the latter point, there are very clear escalation procedures in response to any freedom of information request where any individual, whether they be a journalist or anyone else, is not comfortable. They can ask for an internal review initially, and they can then appeal to the Information Commissioner's Office if they remain unhappy with the way in which any exemption has been applied. My understanding is that some of the issues here relate to legal professional privilege, and those are issues that would need to be explored and that escalation procedure gone through. But in relation to the escalation process, I'm going to ask Deborah to say a little bit more in a moment about how we can give you that confidence that the right procedures are in place. But what the problem here was that the right fraud response was not initiated on the receipt of the whistleblowing letter, and everything flowed from that. And the steps we've been taking is to ensure that that cannot happen again. But there are clear procedures in place whereby if there is a conflict and the internal audit function is not able to sensibly perform that function, then either the department will do so, or where it's a fraud investigation, we will use CIS within the Department of Agriculture to do so. And we've been through those escalation procedures effectively in other cases. Do you want to add to that, Deborah?
Yeah, well, I mean, we do have a very clear whistleblowing policy. We have a very clear fraud response policy. We accept that there were failings in Sport NI with not recognising this properly from the outset as being a suspected fraud, and consequently it wasn't dealt with in that way. We have had assurances from Sport NI, and we have met with Sport NI on a number of occasions to ensure that they fully understand the steps that should be taken, and that we should also be involving, as Peter says, the DARD CIS, who are experts in fraud investigations, and that is the process that should have been followed in this case. And we have, as I say, received assurances that that won't happen again and that staff have been appropriately trained. But I do also accept the point that we have shared the lessons from both of these reports with our arm's length bodies. And we're working on some capital guidance, but absolutely, given the comments that have been made by the member this morning, we will be making sure that we are getting these messages across to our other arm's length bodies to ensure that they do understand that whenever it is a whistleblower, when it does come in as a whistleblower, that is treated as such, and that they invoke their fraud response plan immediately, and that they inform the department. And if they are unclear about any of the steps that need to be taken, we are here to assist and advise as appropriate.
So the last question is just on the... Who said that? I heard that. All right.
I thought it was
But
the
it
PAC meeting.
All right.
Okay, no, well, I think you've got for here. There's all members will pass.
Okay.
Is that okay?
I'm happy to...
Okay. Ms. McCorley.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the presentation. I'm not going to go on too long because I think most of it has all been covered. But what I really am concerned about is how this is perceived in the public eye, and how many things have been got wrong in the one case, and how that creates a picture of something maybe really wrong with. I would say, it's very easy to get the impression that there was something happening here that really was just almost illegal or just inappropriate at the very least. And I'm just thinking about how maybe a person in a low position in an organisation would be sacked for much, much less than what has gone on here. And I just think the public will say, the higher up you go, the bigger your mistake, the more you can get away with it. And it looks like that. And I just wondered, what do you do to dispel those kind of views, which I think are valid, that people would have? And what disciplinary procedures have been taken against any individuals in any of these cases?
Okay, well, thank you for the question. And I think you're right to highlight the issue. There is a clear process whereby people go through their annual reporting and they have judgments made about their performance at all levels through the organisation, right up to Chief Executive. And my understanding is that, for example, this issue of St Colman's was reflected through that process. I don't believe any disciplinary action flowed from that. And that would have been as a result of, I assume in that case, a decision taken that the threshold for disciplinary action was not met. But I understand the reason that you've asked the question. There has, of course, been quite a significant change, both in terms of the board and the chief executive of Sport NI since these events took place. And I think that we're not therefore. We're dealing with a historic issue rather than the individuals who were necessarily in post at the time, and that makes it a bit more awkward to make those judgments now about what should or could or should have been done in 2012.
Yeah, and all that just does nothing to inspire public confidence, because there's nothing there that tells me, well, then this won't happen again, and you'll have a passage of time and the people will be gone, and you'll be left in the same situation. So I just think anybody looking in will be saying, it's just depressing. It's just, and the people also who failed to get the tender, who possibly should have got the tender above Gilbert Ash and didn't, and then all of the ensuing things that happened. It just strikes of grave injustice.
I think that obviously the issue about the tender is in relation to the lyric, and that was an Arts Council and DCAL sponsored rather than the St Colman's. But in relation to St Colman's, there have been very significant steps taken since St Colman's. I mentioned the governance review that was conducted by CIPFA and a very wide range of recommendations that were taken forward. I've also talked about the different nature of the engagement that we now have with Sport NI than we would have had previously. And I know Sinead would attend regularly meetings of the Audit Committee and the Board. And I don't know if you want to say something about the nature of that engagement and so on.
Yeah.
The department has in place a number of formal mechanisms that determine the nature of the relationship with Sport NI within the context of the management statement and financial memorandum. But it's the degree of communication and engagement underpinning those formal mechanisms that speak to the quality of that relationship, which has improved since the occurrence of St Coleman's and some of the recommendations coming out of the governance review. That's because there's a better understanding of the rationale and the nature of the formal mechanisms, and Sport NI and DCAL have undertaken significant ongoing work since 2012 to re-establish relationships and build confidence and trust through improved communications. In my role, I can attest to an improvement in the regularity and quality of communication with the department at an operational level, and at a strategic level, I've experienced a greater sense of partnership working in agreeing and reporting issues of strategic opportunity and collaborative risk management. I've sat as an observer, as Peter said, on the Audit Committee, and I can advise the committee of the level of business engagement by the board and indeed the tone of the meetings where challenge of the executive is welcomed. And this is a positive indicator of effective performance management. So we're seeing a cultural change and an improvement in relationships.
So in a general sense then, how can you allay public concerns about procurement procedures in any of your procurement practices? How can you ensure the public that, yes, everybody's got a fair opportunity to tender and it'll be dealt with fairly, because the perception isn't there?
Well, I think that's a perception that may go beyond just DCAL. Clearly, we have our part to play in that, and what we try to do is to make sure that we absolutely follow the right processes that are set out in law and the processes, indeed, that the Civil Service has in place in order to make sure there is a regularity and a clarity about the process. In my experience, any contractor who felt that they had not been given a fair crack of the whip would not be slow to seek legal recourse, and we've seen that in relation to some procurement exercises, but we didn't see it in relation to either the Lyric or to St Coleman's, and that really is the obvious recourse that any individual has if they feel that they've not been given a fairness in the process.
Thank you.
Mr. McMullen.
Chair, just let me be reasonably brief. Regarding the St Coleman's thing, I was quite pleased to hear from the new Chief Executive when she came before the committee, where she did admit there was failings, and she did admit there will be changes put in place and things will be looked at differently now and into the future. I know reading through it here, you could talk today and tomorrow on this here on the feelings that's in there, and some of them are quite startling. But we are where we are today with that, and we have to get over that. We can't do anything about that. But I think the word confidence has been used here, and I think that's something that needs to be put back in again from the departments and from everybody here. And it has to be this chain, this link, put back in again, so there can't be any failings. And if those who do fail, I do believe, and this is something I'm very passionate on, that if whoever they are, consultants, whoever, if they do transgress, they should not be put back on the list of tendering or evaluation or for any way of getting back in to do work within the particular department again, because there has to be something there. And that's some way of showing confidence that you are really cracking the whip, which I personally do believe you are. And also, there was too much pressure put on to spend money within the financial year. And I think that was one of the main driving forces here within this project, to get the money spent.
Well, I mean, on your last point, you're right that the government by and large works on money that has to be spent in the year that it's allocated to, and that means that all public bodies need to be very vigilant in the way they manage their resources. And certainly DCAL tries to ensure that we do spend the vast majority of our money and no more than that within any given year, because I know in the past, rightly, there's been criticism from members about the fact that there have been too great a level of underspend, and then that leads to money potentially not being not being used to revitalise the economy or to produce the benefits that are needed. So you're right, I think there is a balance there. We should make sure that the money is going to be spent appropriately and properly within the year. It's not just about getting the money spent, but equally I think it's right that we should be under a level of, there should be an onus on us to try to ensure that we do spend what we have allocated to us and try to maximise the benefits to the community that accrue from that. So that's the kind of balance that we're always trying to manage.
Chair, just finishing up now, there should be anybody that's promising money. There should be a letter of comfort or a letter of something coming along with that offer to say that the money's there. It's too easy somebody come up and say, I can put so much in the pot, my contribution, and that's used in the business case, or in fact there's no legal obligation to go ahead with that or anything else. And I think something like that there should be put in as a checks and balances in that way, because it's too easy to say it to boost a tender or a business case. There's nothing to stop that at all in any part of any tendering process, and that should be done. Just to finish up and say, this is a bad story we're looking at, but in no way mirrors the vast majority of good stories that are out there and the benefits that they are to the community. And I think that should come out of here as well. It's not all doom and gloom, and the schemes that are going through sport, etc. And we've seen that there with the stadia projects and that there. I think we're well ahead of the game of everybody else. We're the envy of quite a lot of people, and we'll learn from this here and make us even better going into the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, one last quick question from Mr. Humphreys.
It's actually not so much a point I would like to make. The irony of what we've discussed in the last close on an hour, I guess, in relation to Sport NI, and could I just make the point that all of us in our constituencies will have worked with community groups or sporting organisations, amateur clubs, run by volunteers who are committed and give of their time daily and nightly, for many of them 4 or 5 nights a week. But if every I isn't dotted and every T crossed by those volunteers and those clubs, money isn't allocated, or money is withheld, or money is withdrawn. And I think there needs to be an understanding of the capacity within those clubs. And I would like to think a more common sense approach will emerge out of this, because it really is not acceptable that when people are trained and work hard to work with young people in various sporting codes and disciplines, that they're expected to have this capacity, which clearly isn't in the organisation that demands they have it. And I think there needs to be a more common sense approach. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, thank you. I absolutely understand the tension that exists there. And on the one hand, we want to require that the right standards be set so that we know public money is going to be spent appropriately, because we recognise otherwise the damage to public confidence and so forth that will flow from that. Equally, I think Sport NI does recognise the importance that it's not merely a policing role that it has, it also needs to be a developmental role. And I've heard Antoinette McEwen talking about the fact that she wants Sport NI to become even more an organisation that will be out trying to assist those who are looking for funding in terms of understanding what is required, and also in terms of enabling them to have the capacity to be able to attract the funding. And I think that that's a good direction of travel, and obviously the proof of the pudding is in the eating, so it's a question of whether that can be delivered.
Practical implementation of that.
But we do need to maintain some standards as well, I think. Otherwise, there are risks.
Thanks.
Okay. Can I thank you very much for your presentation, and just wish you well on the rest of the day. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay. Okay, we have a research briefing on the cost of coaching badges. There's an issue that is raised by Mr Hilditch, and we've asked the research to be undertaken by Dan Hull. Can I just welcome Dan and Assembly Research Officer to the meeting? And Dan, are you going to run us through a quick presentation?
Yes, I'll just do that briefly then.
Briefly, okay. Thank you.
So the issue I was asked by the committee to look at was the costs of coaches achieving qualifications or coaching badges, as they're often known. So what I did was to go to 8 different sports, Gaelic sports collectively, rugby, hockey, boxing, athletics, equestrian sports, football and cricket. And I have to say that all of the governing bodies have been very helpful indeed in providing a huge amount of information about the costs of their various different coaching badges. And I should say also that given the complexity of all of the different badges available for each sport, what I haven't tried to do in this paper is just to report all of them, because it is incredibly complex. But I've tried to just pick out the main coaching qualifications within each. So, for example, within football, I've just picked out the 4 main levels. I haven't picked out some of the specialist ones like goalkeeping coaching, for example. And I've left off some of the more generic ones like child protection and first aid and that kind of thing. So members will find on page 323 of your pack, there's a simple bar chart there where I've taken the costs of the main coaching badges for each sport and just taken a mean average for those, just to give a sense of comparison across those 8 different sports of how expensive it is. So you can see from that that football and cricket are by some margin the most expensive for a coach to achieve their badges. Gaelic sports, rugby and hockey are at the other end of the scale. They are much cheaper. However, when I looked at football, I also looked at other jurisdictions, so the English FA, the Republic of Ireland and Scotland, for example, and I found that in Northern Ireland the average is cheaper than anywhere else. So it's £548 as an average. In England, 676, so there is quite a difference there. What tends to push up the price of some of these coaching qualifications is the top end, is the elite coaching qualifications. So, for example, going back to football, again, you can get a grassroots coaching badge for just £40, but it's £1,000 or £900, I think, to get a UEFA B licence. So there's a real disparity between the two. Similarly, with cricket, for example, with Cricket Ireland, at the bottom end of the scale, you can achieve the first coaching badge for just £15. But if you go to the level 4 qualification, it can be more than £2,500. So it's there that the real difference lies, is between the elite end of the coaching badges and the grassroots end. Now, turning then to how coaches can fund these different badges, in terms of financial assistance, in general, each of those governing bodies don't provide financial assistance directly to individuals for obtaining their coaching badges. However, some sports pointed out to me, for example, hockey, athletics, cricket and rugby, that the coaches' club may pay some or all of the fees. Other sports pointed out to me that it's quite common for their local council to support their coaches through these qualifications, but they pointed out that there is quite a lot of variation across Northern Ireland in terms of how that's done. So looking then at what Sport NI do to support this whole sort of coaching programme, well, it doesn't fund individuals directly to get their coaching badges. However, it does have other funds designed to contribute towards coaching in other ways. So it has the Active Awards for Sport, for example, to which clubs can apply. Individuals don't, but clubs can. And the Coaching Legacy programme for governing bodies, and that's really about improving the structure of coaching qualifications and the way in which they're taught and so on. So the last thing then, Deputy Chair, I'll just point out that within Sport Matters, the sports strategy of Sport NI and DCAL, out of the 26 targets which it has, actually 3 of them are focused directly on the issue of coaching qualifications under the heading of performance. And those 3 say, for example, that by 2019, the end of the Sport Matters period, they want to have implemented nationally recognised coach accreditation systems across all of the sports that Sport NI recognises, and that also within that period they want to have accredited at least 700 professional coaches, full-time professional coaches, and at least 45,000 volunteer or part-time coaches. Thank you, Deputy Chair. I'll try and take any questions if I can.
Okay, Mr. Hoshin, thanks first.
Thank you, Chair. Chair,
Dan, in fairness, I don't envy that piece of research there because it's of the wide gamut and remit of the entire research. But there seems to be a huge differential between not only here and across the water, but also between the sports here. What is it? Is there an underlying reason behind that? In terms of costings?
Yes. I'm not sure whether there is an underlying reason per se, but the structure of the coaching awards seems to have an effect. So, for example, for the GAA has three levels. Boxing has two domestic levels, one international level.
I suppose what I'm getting at here maybe is it got down to the critical mass in terms of actual numbers and perhaps even, well, I'm thinking of the likes of cricket there actually in terms of geographical location because it's strong and this is like the northwest, but weak elsewhere. I'm just wondering, is that part of the?
I'm not sure. I think it's hard to say because football, as in association football, is popular pretty much everywhere, really. Whereas cricket, as you say, is more either within the Greater Belfast area or up in the northwest. So I'm not sure whether geographical coverage or the number of participants is the issue. But certainly within football, there are more levels there than in most sports, and of course, once you get up to the UEFA A and UEFA B, there are requirements set there by a Europe-wide body. So maybe that has a bearing also on the complexity and the costs of that particular coaching qualification.
Obviously, Chair, a lot of the sport and development currently and probably after post-RPA is down to the local authorities, and certainly in quite a number of cases they do a very good job in that. However, there's always a shortcoming in the various local sports councils in that whilst coaching would seem to be their remit as they are not allowed to or not, they don't provide capital projects or capital funding. Is there a case there that adequate funding should be put through local authorities specifically for sports coaching?
It could be, perhaps. So, I mean, one thing that struck me when I was liaising with the various governing bodies is they all said, well, it does vary across the piece. It depends at the time in the year when you apply, but it does very much depend on the local council that you're applying to. So, for example, going back to Cricket Island, they pointed out that within the Greater Belfast area, a coach can often get small bursaries. But there's a real difference then between when you go to the northwest, it's quite common for a local council to support 50% or even 100% of the coaching costs. So even within that one sport, it just goes to show the real variation that exists at the moment between different local councils.
Again, I think in all sports actually one of the difficulties too is the provision of refereeing coaching. Did you cover that at all, Dan, or did you touch on that?
I didn't, I must confess.
Okay, all right.
It was referred to by a number of the bodies within the structures, but I didn't look at it specifically in this case, no.
Okay. Mr. Hilditch.
Thanks, Chair, and thank Dan for the piece of excellent work that he has carried out. Unfortunately, my ESR, as the officers know, has not been working, so I've only got a chance to see these this morning when I eventually got a hard copy here. There's some issues I would certainly like to return to. There's some issues I want to check out because I have some information in my head there's a wee bit of an alternative sort of structure there as well, and there could be different parts to different badges which cost additional monies and whatnot and stuff. Rather than ask any further questions today, I wish to maybe revisit it at some stage. Chair, and just going on to Cal's point as well, it's crucial for the further development. We're going to hear shortly from people who are working at the grassroots level. I was at a meeting last Saturday morning of one particular club to make sure that their mini soccer is in an adequate shape to take place in September. They're looking forward that far forward for next year already. They need 16 new coaches because the whole thing has blossomed and grown from what it was to what they're aiming for in September. They need 16 new coaches, and yes, some of these are personal badges and qualifications to the individual, but it's a need for clubs and groups and communities to have them working on the ground and to try and help them get to where they want to be.
And indeed, Deputy Chair, if I might just respond to Mr Hilditch's first point there about some of the additional costs. I think that's certainly true because the coaching workforce survey which Sport NI published in 2010, as part of that they had a whole series of focus groups asking coaches what were the barriers to achieving more qualifications. And they certainly pointed out it wasn't just the costs of the badges themselves, but it's often the travel, it's the accommodation, It's all of those associated things, particularly when you move up through the levels, which can be quite prohibitive. And I think I'm right in saying that I think around about 30% of coaches said that it was cost that was really holding them back from progressing any further up the scale.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Hull. Thank you. Do you want to leave this into another time, or do you want to? Okay, that'll do all right. Okay, thank you. Our final briefing is a joint briefing from the Irish Football Association, GAA and Ulster Rugby regarding the work in tackling social exclusion and poverty. And maybe the clerk's going to give us a wee bit of background.
Chair, there's a memo here at page 335. Members will recall that in November 2012, it was announced that the GAA, IFA and IRFU would each receive 1.5 million over a 3-year period. So that's 4.5 million in total, 1.5 million each over the 3-year period, with the express purpose of tackling poverty, social exclusion and promoting equality in sport. So obviously the committee is basically bringing in this briefing today to see how that's being spent and what each of those sporting bodies is doing.
Okay.
Mr. Vashi.
All right.
Chair, I'm just getting bad economic news from my own constituency, and I'm going to have to leave shortly, so can I, before the end of this presentation, so I apologise in advance.
The IFA briefing paper is at page 337, Ulster Rugby's briefing paper is at 345, and GAA paper is now been tabled just at this moment. Can I welcome the following to our meeting? We have Claire Adams, Community Relations Manager, IFA. We have Ryan Feeney, Head of Strategy and Public Affairs, Ulster GAA, and Chris Webster, Domestic Rugby Manager, Ulster Rugby. And can I invite someone, whoever's going to lead on their presentation, please? Okay.
Oh, lovely, thank you.
Okay, Claire.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for the invitation here today to share on what the Irish Football Association has been doing with the money awarded in November 2012. The Irish Football Association developed 7 projects across the departments of the Irish Football Association, and I'm just going to touch on each of them briefly, just to let you know what we've been doing and what our progress has been in each area. Our disability football programme was aimed at building a shared community by promoting equality, celebrating diversity and providing mechanisms for integration. So far, we have provided power chairs to allow disabled players to participate in power chair football in Lisburn and Belfast, and we're hoping to provide more chairs for a brand new club in Derry Londonderry. This was developed on a needs analysis done by our disability football manager, who saw that there were quite a lot of players in the North West who didn't have access to these facilities, and now we're very proud of the fact we have a new club and will soon have new power chairs for these players to engage. We developed a comprehensive health programme which was focused on marketing, resources and educational training, promoting healthy lifestyles and positive mental health messages. So far, we have engaged several hundred people in health conferences right across Northern Ireland. There have been mental health workshops and health seminars targeting football clubs across Northern Ireland. We've recently launched a healthy eating weekend, which is aimed at the Irish Premier League, but then transcends down into the grassroots clubs across Northern Ireland. The Health Carousel programme targets secondary schools and so far has reached 1,244 secondary school pupils across Northern Ireland. We've also delivered several first aid and defibrillator training courses for staff and stakeholders, and I just want to take this opportunity to share a story that has resulted from that training. One of our grassroots development officers was trained in how to use a defibrillator and was therefore issued with one, as he is out on the ground very often in TSN areas. Whilst driving to a project, a gentleman at the side of the road had careered off and had had a heart attack, and there was an ambulance there dealing with him, an ambulance car there dealing with him. Our grassroots development officer pulled over at the side of the road and was able to use his defibrillator and his training to restart the man's heart and save his life. We've just developed our new club mark, which we're very proud of, and it takes part of the club and community development programme, focused on strengthening the link between clubs and their surrounding communities. So far, 6 leagues have been trained in club education and development, which promotes good administration at the clubs, positive coaching structures and encourages a good community engagement level. The Irish FA's Club Excellence Mark was launched in October 2013, and at the moment we have around 90 clubs registered to progress, and the first 2 clubs to be accredited are grassroots clubs from TSN areas in Northern Ireland, one being North End Football Club in Ballymena and one being Shankill United. We have provided 4 comprehensive volunteering workshops across Northern Ireland aimed at supporting football clubs to develop their volunteering policies, recruiting and managing volunteers appropriately. And various training seminars on club education have taken place across Northern Ireland targeting TSN areas. The Good Relations Community Football Programme and Coach Education Programme aims at engaging teenagers in physical activity to instil personal qualities and to enhance their possible future prospects. At the moment, we've delivered Good Relations programmes with disengaged teens, with over 120 young people who may be at risk of offending under the age of 18. And we have also delivered 2 free Level 1 coaching programmes in TSN areas, with more happening in the upcoming years, particularly over the summer. Our Schools Enterprise programme targets inspiring young people through the experience of entrepreneurship and enterprise. So far, we've engaged with 1,189 secondary school students, and within preliminary research has found that there was a 78% increase in students' enterprise knowledge, and that there was a 44% increase in students being excited about getting involved in enterprise. The Football for All Grassroots programme, and the one I would actively be involved in, targets promoting a fun, safe and inclusive culture throughout all levels of football in Northern Ireland. This takes in a wide remit of projects, including an interface cage football project. It takes in grassroots projects, working with homeless, unemployed, drug and alcohol dependent and ethnic minorities. It also involves an educational resource programme, which is curriculum mapped at Key Stage 2. We've delivered this programme with other 700 young people in schools and youth organisations. Our grassroots programmes also allow people who are unemployed or maybe are between employment to have casual paid positions. They are trained in how to deliver these programmes and are then consequently in schools and youth organisations. And the final of these 7 programmes is the Small-Sided Games programme. This is to provide fun, safe and inclusive football opportunities through age-appropriate coaching and play. So far, we have engaged with 6,814 young people, and that's just counting up until December. And we're also looking forward to recruiting coordinators and volunteer observers who are long-term unemployed or over the age of 50 to get involved with this programme in a Back in the Game initiative. So to conclude, the work that we have done has seen enormous reach. We are involving more and more young people, youth and amateur football, more girls in football, those who are disabled or from minorities who perhaps previously wouldn't have been involved. The reach has been tremendous and the results have been tremendous, and we've seen that already through preliminary evaluations. And I'd just like to say that our work also tackling sectarianism is intrinsic throughout all of these programmes, especially in the education programmes where we're out in schools, we're talking to young people and getting their feedback. And a lot of our work through the Decal project is supported through other projects in the Irish Football Association, such as the Peace 3 Plunder project, which is coming to an end in 2014, August. 4 staff who are involved in delivering this Decal project are actually funded by that, and there's a potential there that a lot of this good work could end should the Decal funding finish or not be renewed in March 2015. Thank you.
Okay. Any other gentlemen? Okay.
I go now, Chair, and can I first of all apologise for the tardiness of my homework. This last 48 hours I was dealing with the Police College and I only got the email to Ciara last night at 12:20, so I apologise to the committee for only putting a report in this morning. But can I just say it's good to be here along with my colleagues and be given the opportunity to give an overview of the Tackling Poverty programme, which has added significant value to the work that the GAA and the IFA and Ulster Rugby are all involved in terms of capacity building, in terms of building community cohesion, promoting economic development at grassroots level. Firstly, in terms of our programmes, we focused the majority of the money on 2 capital projects. The Tyrone GAA Centre in Garvaghey and Ballygolly, which is a 6.7 million development, and £500,000 went into that from the Tackling Poverty Fund to look at accessing and ensuring that the centre was more available to participation at grassroots level, because some of the capacity that we built in the centre was focused on our elite athletes, and this allowed us to actually open it up significantly and ensure it became a significant community hub. The second tranche of money went to the Antrim GAA Centre in Dunsilly. in County Antrim, which is under development at the moment. There's already been about 2.8 million invested in that from GA funding and about 250,000 from Sport NI. The other 500,000 from the Decal Tackling Poverty Fund has now gone into the development of facilities at that centre, and we look forward to further developments in that over the next number of months. In terms of revenue programmes, you may have noticed, Chair, I come in with a lunchbox, and unfortunately there's no food in it. But my staff would be very annoyed if I wasn't able to promote the healthy hamper that was developed by Ulster GA and given out to schools right across the province who are engaged in our coaching programme, primary schools in particular. That hamper included information on healthy eating, but also children got the opportunity to have a healthy breakfast morning as part of this programme. And we're given information on dental health, given information on mouth guards and the importance of wearing that in sport, concussion, also looking at areas of hydration, looking at mental well-being as well. And we have this document which goes into second-level schools called Stand Out for the Crowd, which focuses on healthy eating, mental health, and also looking at participation in sport at that 12 to 18 level within our own membership. The Healthy Eating Hamper included this book, which our staff put together, and has a range of activities which teachers can use at school level, again focused on healthy eating, focused on health and well-being choices, and also focused on getting children involved in sport, and a poster campaign as well. The other programme that we ran was a Heads Up campaign, and I have the file here, and I'll leave these resources with the staff. Each club in Ulster got the Heads Up pack, which it's not the GA's role or any sporting body's role to promote or to be involved in counselling, but what we do is we've linked with several organisations to try and deal with the issue of suicide. It's unfortunate, and we can look particularly this morning, Chair, at the report in BBC Radio Ulster about self-harming, that we have a situation where this seems to be a growing problem, particularly mental health issues. I've argued strongly that the involvement in sport or the involvement in community activity can drag or take young people away from these issues, and the Mental Health and the Heads Up campaign is about that. And it's about focusing at them at that grassroots level. And we have also provided this to schools as a poster campaign. It's a pack, and we're also getting officials not trained up in mental health issues, but trained in the way to refer people within the club if they have an issue with the mental health pack as well. Included in our community health and wellbeing programme, we have the Drink, Drugs and Sausage Rolls programme, which is focused at third level, and it's again about telling people when they go to university to take care of themselves and not imbibe or mess about a bit too much. So we push that programme right across our third level and right across the universities, and focus it on first years that have come to undergraduate studies for the first time. The Alcohol and Substance Abuse programme is again a province-wide message that we have to tell people to be careful with alcohol and stay away from drugs. And again, that's a poster campaign. It's a programme that we've run right throughout the province and right throughout the clubs over the last number of years, and this funding allowed us to enhance it by putting resources in place which were allowed to support the coaches and the officials that were on the ground. The social initiative, which is another part of the programme, was essentially about looking at the people who used to play our sports, who used to be involved in our sports, but had actually removed themselves slightly and are sitting in the community, maybe 65 plus, not involved in community activity anymore. And what we have done as part of this programme, we've targeted them, brought them back into community activity at the club. That might not just be Gaelic games, it could be bowls, it could be anything, but brought them back into the club and got them involved again, and also ran trips to Croke Park, ran trips to matches across the province here in Ulster, and got a social aspect to it to try and bring these people who were sort of displaced within the community back into the core of the community again. That's been quite a successful programme as well. On the coaching and games side, very similar to the work that Claire outlined, we've now established county hurling and football teams in every county, and that's where we've got kids that are from the age of 16 right up to 20, some of whom are in wheelchairs, who are playing our games, and we now have a competition run in April time. It's the first time we've ever actually had to do that. So, you know, a situation where Fermanagh will be against Antrim in the hurling or the football championship for in wheelchair and football hurling, and I think that's been a very positive part of the programme as well. On the capacity building side of things, very much similar to the IFA, we've had a club mark accreditation in place now for a number of years, and we've been able to enhance the club planning and officer training programme as part of this. 1,000 officers have went through training within the last 6 weeks right across the province, and they've been trained in capacity building, how to be a chairperson, how to be a secretary, how to be a treasurer, manage finances, club planning, community building. And core to all that, very similar to the work within the IFA, is equality and promoting the idea of a shared future and promoting the idea of outreach within the local community and engaging with other groups as well. And that's been very, very successful. We finished our last event in Fermanagh last Saturday, and they've taken place on Saturdays. They're I wouldn't say a full-day event, but from 9 o'clock, from 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's been very successful thus far. We also have an online accreditation process for our clubs, but we have a toolkit which will be finalised now in April time, which will essentially be a one-stop shop for anybody in terms of capacity building. That's a funding application and a quality policy, a job description at club level, information on how we have a very unique process within the GA which is called structure given, which people give money into essentially a fund for an athlete to develop their club, and how to maximise that, and obviously looking at the area of community amateur sports clubs as well. Finally, we're developing a community leadership programme for officials at grassroots level, and this is going to be accredited hopefully by OCN. Now, we're very much in the embryonic stage of that, but it will be where chairpersons and secretaries at all levels can come into the club and gain accreditation through the leadership work they're carrying out at club level. And essentially, Chair, that's the programmes that we've rolled out at the moment, and after Chris's presentation, happy to take questions. Thanks.
Okay. Chris, okay.
Okay. I suppose, first of all, just to thank the committee for the invitation to come along and speak this morning, and to update you on the progress that we as an organisation have made under the Promoting Equality, Tackling Poverty and Social Exclusion Through Sport programme. As an organisation, I think it's important to highlight that we are delighted to have received such a significant investment over a 3-year period, and that investment has allowed us to build our capacity as an organisation, broaden our reach into communities and areas that previously we've been unable to or found difficult to engage with, allowed us to develop partnership with a range of organisations, and I suppose key has allowed us to increase participation specifically within target groups. This morning I'd like to touch on just a few elements from the report, and members will be glad to hear that I'm not going to go through it line by line, but to pick out a few highlights. Specifically, what I'd like to talk about is just what we've done with our funding. We've taken a slightly different approach to the other two bodies. Our programme objectives, look at the impact that the programme has had to date and reference a couple of our projects. Talk about some of the current challenges that we face over the course of the next 12 months, and also to give you some of my own thoughts in terms of how this programme could be further developed. By way of background, confirmation of funding was received by ourselves in February 2013, which effectively meant that year one was a 2-month period for us. We're now coming to the end of year 2, and our current programme is due to finish in March 2015, which is obviously 12 months from now. In terms of how we spent the money, year 1 was very much focused on capital investment through equipment to support our programmes, community gyms, transport, and some rugby legacy equipment, which I'll touch on later on. Year 2 and Year 3 has very much been about the employment of staff and supporting programme costs. As of the 1st of this month, we currently employ 17 members of staff under the programme, and from the 1st of April, we'll be employing a total of 20 members of staff. And this has been due to us being able to profile our spend, and also driven by identified need as we've got into the delivery aspect of the programme itself. In terms of programme objectives, we have 8 key programme objectives, which are linked not only to the overall objectives of the programme itself, but is also linked to the strategic direction of Ulster Rugby and the Irish Rugby Football Union. And I suppose a key aspect for us in the programme is that it must be mutually beneficial to all partners involved. In terms of our performance to date against our objectives, as I said, I'd just like to pick out some of the highlights from the tabled report. And these results are from our last quarterly report, which is up to the 31st of December 2013. Our first objective is to grow the number of school-aged children participating in rugby development programmes by 10% by the end of the project. Our priority in regards to this has been working in what we would call non-traditional playing schools or areas, so areas where rugby hasn't been particularly strong or indeed been active at all. To date, we've engaged with 10,000 plus participants, with 60% of those participants coming from the top 30% of areas of multiple deprivation. Our programme is now moving to what we're terming a legacy sustainability phase. We're conscious that with having had so many staff on the ground delivering, that it's important that we upskill our volunteers, our teachers, our coaches, etc., so that they're able to take the programme on if funding isn't able to be continued. A second objective for us was to establish 2 new rugby clubs, which are based specifically within the top 30% areas of multiple deprivation. by the end of the programme itself. To date, we've identified 2 key areas, one in West Belfast, working within the Colin Glen and Shankill area, and one in Derry/Londonderry, based in the Bogside. The project in West Belfast is based on work that our staff have been doing in local schools since September 2013. A working group has now been set up to establish basically a rugby programme within the area, and that's been based on feedback we've had from parents, from participants, and from some of the community leaders who've seen the benefit in it. Through our project in Derry/Londonderry, our staff have been coordinating a programme with Derry City Council, City of Derry Rugby Club, and again key community stakeholders. The stakeholders have now got to the stage where they're driving the programme on with support from us, and again I think that's a key aspect of the legacy of this programme. One of the areas that we decided to look at was the establishment of what we've called community gyms, and we're very conscious that for a lot of areas where maybe rugby hasn't been particularly strong or there hasn't been that opportunity to play, that a lot of the potential participants are focused on fitness and improving their health and well-being. So we've looked to establish community gyms, either in existing rugby clubs, schools or community facilities. We've provided equipment. To date, £120,000 worth of equipment has gone into these venues. We also, through our fitness and education officers, provide training and support to volunteers. And a key aspect of our development over the next 12 months is to upskill these volunteers so that they're able to take the programmes on themselves. And this can lead to potential for employment opportunities for these people as they become appropriately qualified. We're also looking in terms of developing our legacy in terms of developing after-schools clubs and working with other community organisations. And a key aspect for this, again, is this idea of sustainability, that it can't just be about delivering a programme for 2 years and then walking away, that there is an opportunity to take this on. The final 2 areas in terms of objectives, particularly where we've had a lot of success, first one has been in the area of disability rugby. We have a target of growing the number of disability rugby clubs from 5 to 10 by the end of the programme. As we currently stand, we've established 8 clubs within Ulster, 3 as a direct result of this programme. And now we, as a province, as you're aware, Ulster is one of 4 provinces. We are the leading province within Ireland, and we're actually setting and driving the agenda from an Irish rugby point of view, and the other provinces are following our lead and taking our guidance. Female rugby has been a significant area of growth for us, and again this is down to the fact that we've employed dedicated staff in this area. We now have had our most successful Girls' Schools Cup ever, with double in the increased number of teams that are now playing, and schools from areas of social need are playing in the Schools Cup for the first time. To reflect the success that we've had with regards to the development of female rugby, we're hosting a female rugby conference at the end of this month, which will look to promote, celebrate and develop a strategy for rugby, for female rugby within Ulster for the next number of years. And as a result of that, we've seen success with our number of clubs being established. In terms of, I suppose, some of the current challenges that we're facing, the programmes have been specifically around the area of social inclusion, and this has been a new development for us within the IRFU Ulster branch. All of our programmes begin by working in partnership with key stakeholders from the community to develop and design activities that are of mutual benefit. And this ensures that we get community buy-in from the start, and more importantly, ownership from the communities as well, that this will help to drive the development of rugby. An example of this is in the Colin Community Association, where we now have 3 organisations involved in helping us to pull together a strategy. It's being driven by the community for the community, and we're there to facilitate it. As a result of the work that we've done, we've seen an increase in terms of involvement with the game, more participation, and we've seen an increase in opportunities for people from areas of multiple deprivation and underrepresented groups to be involved. So as I said, we've talked about the increase in female rugby, the increase in disability rugby, through our community gym initiative and through our volunteering opportunities. The one last project that I want to talk about, just to give you a flavour of maybe how we've changed our approach. The City of Belfast Boxing Academy is based at the bottom of the Newton Arch Road, Short Strand. It's based in an old school facility and very much is focused in terms of boxing, but provides a range of community activities for people from all sides of the community. Through their support, we've been able to go in and establish a community gym, which is open to all members. And our rationale behind this is that it provides an opportunity for kids and young adults in the area who maybe want to get involved in sport but not necessarily in an organised fashion, can come in, use the facility at very low cost or no cost, but at the same time we can run rugby development programmes on the back of it. Also, a number of our local rugby clubs and schools have come down to use the facility as a way of providing a different method of training and to change the focus a little bit for them. And it's through this partnership that we believe is the way forward, and it'll help us to develop our sport further. Finally, in terms of, I suppose, some of the current challenges that we have, for us, because we have so many staff employed, as the programme enters into its final year, there's a lack of potential clarity about the future of the funding, and this is where our staff potentially lose focus and or lose motivation, and therefore the ability to deliver against the targets could potentially suffer. Also, we have the potential that if staff do not have sort of confirmation of their funding, there is potential that they could leave before the end of the programme in March 2015. And again, this will offer us a difficulty in terms of filling these posts, but also achieving the programme objectives. We have to continue to build capacity within our volunteers so that they can continue the work beyond the current programme. Excuse me. And I think also for a couple of our new sections, there is the key of them becoming integrated into their parent clubs, particularly with disability sections and women's. And that is a challenge for us, no doubt. In terms of programme development and where we could go forward, I think if we were able to secure an extension to the programme, not just for ourselves but across the three sports, we would be able to build on the legacy and the work that we've done to date, and that this could help us increase participation and objectives, not just beyond March 2015 but much further. From our own point of view within Ravenhill and the opening of the new Nevin Spence Education Centre as part of the stadium redevelopment, there's great potential for linking our current programme to the options that the Education Centre provides us with as well. And also by extending the current level of support and providing additional programme support, we can start to touch on some of the areas that both Claire and Ryan have mentioned with regards to health and well-being, also from a point of view of tackling some of the issues which our society are facing. Finally, one of the things that we have identified is that as we've increased participation and we've developed our programmes, we're now starting to encounter situations where our current facility provision is no longer fit for purpose. As we've increased the breadth of our sport in terms of widening access to underrepresented groups, we're now finding that our changing facilities, our shower facilities, are no longer suitable for bringing in additional females. Our pitches and facilities can't cope with the increased levels of participation, and our poor quality of clubhouses are no longer engaging and providing the facilities that communities expect. So I think in terms of one of the barriers to sustainability of the programme and beyond March 2015 is how we can access some of the capital investment that we've heard about. Finally, I'd just like to highlight three things. The programme has been a great success. It has delivered against the objectives as set out in terms of the vision and the overall aim, both from DCAL's point of view and from our point of view as Ulster Rugby. That being said, we're just scratching the surface. There is so much potential to build on in terms of what has been done to date, and this potential can only be fulfilled by taking a longer-term view. And I suppose finally and crucially, that this programme is more than just a sports participation programme. The wider community benefit and impact is just being realised. There is so much more scope in terms of widening the work and addressing additional issues which communities are now facing. And these issues can be tackled on the back of sport, however they need to be properly coordinated and resourced. Thank you for your time and again for the opportunity.
Can I thank you all for your detailed presentations and welcome the fact that many of the issues you are currently trying to tackle. How does each organisation monitor the effectiveness of projects specifically designed to tackle social inclusion and poverty? How do you monitor that?
First, for our Health and Enterprise programme, we've already appointed evaluators, independent evaluators, and we've already had a publication done by I4 Education who deliver the Enterprise programme, and that's where the statistics were drawn from in the presentation. Going into year 3 of the decal project, within our budget at the offset, we put in for independent evaluators. So that's something that we're going to be appointing for the final year. That will be attached to each project that we run. So the 7 projects will be independently evaluated to assess their reach, to assess their sustainability and the capacity building effect that they've had on the participants.
Yeah, Chair, very similar to Claire. We have an independent scrutiny group which works on a day-to-day basis, which is chaired by my deputy, Maura McMenamin, and has the finance department, obviously to keep them happy, and our coaching and games department represented. And they meet on a weekly basis to ensure that we're meeting the targets and report back to DECAL. And similar to the IFA, we're also seeking an independent review of the work coming into year 3.
Again, very similarly, we report against our results versus targets. We have commissioned independent evaluation, which is ongoing, and I suppose also anecdotally as well, in terms of gathering case studies from people out on the ground as to the impact that it's had.
Okay. Thank you for that. Mr. Humphreys.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you all very much for your presentation. Can I first of all start by saying, Mr. Feeney, we have a statutory duty as a scrutiny committee of the DECAL department and its extended family to scrutinise the working of the department and the arm's length bodies, and it's not helpful or acceptable for us to get a paper as you come into the room, and if you just bear that in mind for the future, because I've had, and our colleagues will have had to read the paper during the meeting, and that means we can't listen to presentations, and that's not exactly helpful to us and far from ideal. So if you just bear that in mind. But can I just ask you, in relation to the paper you've given us this morning, there are a couple of things that I wanted to draw attention to. The ASAP project, I mean, I represent North Belfast where there's a huge problem of alcohol and drugs abuse. Could you put some more meat on the bones for us for that? Because that seems very interesting.
Okay, well, first of all, I accept and apologise, Mr. Humphrey. It can particularly my fault, and under no circumstances, Chair, would I or the GA ever show disrespect to the committee. It was my fault, not the GA's, just due to other commitments over the last couple of days, so I do apologise for that. Can I also say, in terms of the ASAP programme, Mr. Humphrey, where we're at the moment is we actually bring our youth teams in and give them a presentation by trained coaches or by external agencies or by our health and wellbeing manager, Maura McMenamin, on the importance of healthy eating, on the importance of dealing with a sensible approach to alcohol. So essentially what they would do is take a case study of somebody and how alcohol can affect their body and what impact that would have on them in terms of their participation on the pitch. And that would be done with youth teams right across the province. I can get you the statistics exactly, but we have over 411 clubs in the province, and I'm confident that about 200 of them have went through this programme. The second fact then is that we also then work closely with a range of statutory agencies, including the PSNI, the Health Promotion Agency, on looking at how drugs and the issue of drugs affects people's bodies. So it's actually taking people on a story to say, this is me, and this is the impact that alcohol will have on me, and this is the impact that drugs will have on me. And we follow that up with a promotional campaign to ensure that people are having a sensible approach to alcohol, obviously obeying the law when it comes to alcohol, though we all have to admit the fact that we deal with the scourge of teenage abuse of alcohol right across society. And the second point would be then about the dealing with drugs. And I have to say there's a good partnership developed on this. And you mentioned North Belfast. There are other areas, particularly in Strabane and Lurgan, where this work has been very, very effective, where we've clustered clubs together, brought children together and give them an overview. And also we've done this work in quite a few schools as well. So it's a presentation and a promotional campaign followed up then with an ongoing, so there'll be one presentation initially, but a promotional campaign, training of coaches, and then followed up with a final part of the programme as well. But the ongoing part of it will be presentation based.
Could I ask for you, Chair, will you probably send more information on that?
Certainly, no problem. I'm very happy to do that.
Okay. The other point I wanted to ask you as well, just reading through the paper, the community leadership programme, could you again expand on that for us?
Well, one thing we found, Mr. Humphrey, was that for us to have success on the pitch, for our athletes and our managers and our coaches to do very well, everything has to go right off the pitch. So facilities development, fundraising, child protection, health and safety, all of which you indicated earlier in the presentation to Cal, is done by volunteers. And the significant amount of social capital that all sport gives to local communities sometimes isn't valued or measured. And we have people that have a vast range of experience who are building up a level of capacity as a chairperson or a secretary or an official within their club. And what we want to actually do is accredit that. So we're putting together a programme which will last probably over 6 months, where people will get information on how to be a good manager, how to engage in communication skills, community outreach skills, how to essentially be a good community player, but based in the sporting context. We have a programme at the moment that exists, but it's not to the level that could be accredited. So we're working now to put that up to accreditation level in year 2 of this programme, and we'd hope to have that up and running and put a significant amount of officials through it.
Again, would it be possible to get some more information on that? And thanks very much. If I might turn to and thank you for that, to rugby. Chris, in relation to, and I have seen the Ulster rugby bus going up and down the Shankle Road. As a governor in local primary schools, I'm aware of the work that you're doing, and I really think that's great. Reaching out to areas like West Belfast and the Greater Shankle, I think that's to be commended. Disability rugby, could you put a bit more meat on the bones for us there as to what you've been doing there? Because that's a very interesting concept.
Yeah, disability rugby, our focus has been on the provision of tag rugby, which is a non-contact version of the game, aimed primarily at children and young adults with learning disability. So it came out from a parent who was keen for his son to be involved in rugby, but felt that the current structures didn't support him, and that was the establishment of our first club going back about 8 years ago, the New Forge Tigers. On the back of that, we've now grown to having 8 clubs up and running within the province, and they're all aligned to a more established rugby club. So rather as being standalone, they're a section within Portadown or what have you. The idea behind it is it's about giving young children and young adults an opportunity to play the game in a safe, structured way. There are other areas of disability which we're also looking into. So wheelchair rugby, for example, we've been providing support to the Ulster Barbarians, who have been an offshoot of a team in Dublin. So again, our staff have gone down, provided them with information around how to get their club structures and constitution right. Also looking at the provision of facilities, and I suppose, as Claire mentioned as well, the provision of equipment through specifically tailored wheelchairs to play rugby in is quite a significant investment. So we've been assisting them with how they get access to that. We've also looked into the idea of mixed ability rugby, which we're bringing, we're basically having teams which are mixed of people with and without disability, particularly from a learning point of view, playing a game. We had a demonstration game a couple of weeks ago at Malone, where we brought teams over from Scotland and Wales to play, and this was with a view to the RFU deciding if this was an area that we wanted to develop. So on the back of the work that we've done from a national point of view, there's now a disability committee set up within Dublin, and they're looking at driving the strategy across the whole of the island with regards to it, because part of the difficulty is that within each of the provinces there was a danger we're going off and doing different things, and where the teams want to come together and play, or clubs together and play, we wanted to do that in a structured way.
And can I also ask you then, the Community Gym Initiative, how successful has that been, and what impact has it had in the communities where they've been established, and where have they been established?
Well, we have a number. We've 6 gyms up and running at the minute. So City of Belfast Boxing Academy, Rainey Old Boys Rugby Club in Macrofelt, Greater Village Regeneration Trust, Park Hall Integrated School, Strabane Academy and Malone. And we have another 9 sites coming on stream within the next couple of months. The success has been really well received, again, from the point of view of, particularly we're adding to facilities, we're providing another option for people within their local communities. And I suppose what we've also done is that, in the likes of the rugby clubs, is that we're opening up their ability to attract different members of the community in. So, for example, Malone Rugby Club, on the back of the work that they've done, have now been able to access additional funding from other sources, because it's showing that wider community outreach, which maybe hadn't been there before or perceived to have been there before. It's a great way for us to actually get new members in. They come in, use the gym, see the facilities that are there, and then it sparks an interest in maybe actually getting involved in the rugby side of it, both from a playing point of view or volunteering or coaching. So that's part of the sustainability that we want to push through as well.
Okay. No, I'm not finished.
Can I bring you back in? There's one member that wants to leave. Is that okay? It's okay. Ms McCauley has to leave the meeting, so okay.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks very much for your presentations. And can I just congratulate you all on the actions you have taken to address these challenging issues? And I'm just going to ask the same questions of the three of you, if you don't mind. In terms of, you've all received, or you're in the process of receiving funding for stadia development. And I just want to ask about how you'll use that to address social exclusion and poverty issues.
Maybe from our point of view, is probably further ahead in terms of our stadium nearly being finished. We see the stadium as a key aspect of linking into this programme. Over the course of this season, we have brought a number of groups along to experience Ravenhill on a match night. So the participants get the chance to play rugby or be involved in rugby out within their local school or local community. But we bring it into the context of the professional game, seeing people that they would see on TV up close, experiencing the atmosphere, that helps to really create a bond there. But the stadium is more than just being there on the 14 match nights during the season. It's a community facility. So our intention is that once we have the building work completed, that we'll be able to bring groups in and link it into the curriculum. So there's all sorts of aspects from an education point of view of saying, well, look, this is what goes into being a professional player. This is what's involved in rugby from a technology point of view, through media studies, through sports science. So part of what we see is creating an inspiration and creating an opportunity to highlight the wide range of opportunities that professional sport or any sport actually offers, and that it's not just about the players that are on the pitch, but that there's a wider network in behind it. And I think when all three stadia are up and running, that the potential in terms of utilising those to promote participation, promote the benefits that sport brings, is absolutely huge, and I don't think we fully realise that at the minute. Certainly from our point of view within Ulster Rugby, we feel that Ravenhill and the redevelopment of Ravenhill will help to strengthen the work that we're doing at grassroots. It's very much about being our professional and grassroots aspect being combined in that.
Much the same as Chris, really. We would envisage the new National Stadium to be a community hub and to bring in the communities who are based around the residential area. Again, as Chris said, we would hope to develop an educational programme around this. It's something that we have done in the past, but it's been quite staggered because we haven't had that sort of joined-up facility in that we engage with schools and deliver our Key Stage 2 educational resource within their classroom. We then invite them along to observe a match, and that takes in quite a wide variety of things. It could be observing fan behaviour, observing the atmosphere. Do you know, is it a festival-type atmosphere? What kind of people do you see? What colour are people wearing? We're promoting that Save Green, the anti-sectarian initiative that we started back in 2000. So we really see it as a community hub, not only for local residents, for local young people who are out and about, but also to have casual sports facilities, you know, to have a 3G pitch that they can get to have a gym, to have a sports hall. And it's something that we certainly have fed into during the planning stages of the new National Stadium. But it can go as far as empowering women and to bring in disability sports, to have that accessibility and that facility for people who maybe perhaps in the past don't feel empowered to go to a football club, that they can come in on a more casual basis perhaps and to play a quick game of five-a-side with their friends. It's to bring it right down to that grassroots level and to transcend, you know, the magnificence of a national stadium, that it is for every individual who likes football can come and get involved in it. So we really see it on a grassroots, domestic and international basis.
Well, Ms McCorley, what we plan within the new Casement Stadium is a community heritage and education centre, very similar to the model that's already been developed with our colleagues in Ulster Rugby with the Nevin Spence Centre. And again, that will be a community hub where people have input in terms of developing programmes in it, but also we'll be able to run our programmes as well, particularly with local GA clubs, but other organisations in the area to build capacity and promote capacity building and social capital. We will have failed with the project if the lights are not on in the stadium on a constant basis and people locally are not playing on the pitch. This is not about the elite. The elite will play there and there will be big days there, but the reality is this is about the local community and wider afield getting an opportunity to play on the provincial stadium pitch. The final point I would say is, and Ulster Rugby have also got this ambition that we hope to get every school child in Ulster to play on the pitch within the first 5 years of it opening. And that's our ambition to do that, that we'll have schools, community groups and others coming up to the stadium and working along with our colleagues in the IFA and Rugby to use the three stadiums in the city to promote the ideal of a shared future, good relations and also the idea of getting communities, people from communities right across the province up to the stadiums and engaging regardless of their social background.
And can I just ask, and I know it's always challenging in local communities where you're building in residential areas or you're improving existing facilities, can I just ask how you coped and dealt with and addressed the concerns of local residents in the process of carrying out the work?
I suppose from our point of view with Ravenhill, we've always had a close engagement with residents. We're conscious that we're probably on three sides of the ground, that there are different challenges around match nights and the issues are there. So at the outset, we met and identified what those issues were, and we've looked to build that into the development process. I suppose it's about ongoing communication with the residents, keeping them informed as to the developments, and I suppose how we're looking to tackle any issues or concerns that they have. So that's just been an ongoing process and will continue to be an ongoing process, I think.
For ourselves, I haven't been personally involved in the stadium. Our stadium sponsor, Jeff Patterson, could answer questions in more depth. However, I do know that we've had community consultations with the groups in and around the stadium area, particularly the Greater Village area, who we currently engage with on the decal project that was earlier discussed. That consultation did involve quite a few meetings to discuss the plans, what was going to happen, and it was important for them and important for us for them to feel like there would be opportunity for them, and as I just previously discussed, to have that as a community hub and to make them aware and feel that this will be a stadium for them. It's not just going to be set apart as a national stadium, but it's also going to be to draw in local communities. So we did have quite a rigorous community consultation on that level with local residents, and I do know that the relationships were built up. And while there was initial perhaps hesitation or concern, through, as Chris said, regular communication and regular acknowledgement of the fact that this is a major redevelopment, to let people know that they are empowered to have a say and let people know that they are empowered to then have a part, it's going to be for them as well.
Well, I think, as you know, Ms McCorley, we've had some issues regarding the community enabling the Casement Park project. I led the consultation process with them. We've had 2.5 years of engagement and consultation right across West Belfast and the entire city, and the entire province even. That ranged from the West Belfast Partnership, South Belfast Partnership, a range of statutory bodies, a range of community groups, and that's ongoing, and importantly the residents, and that included ongoing engagements with the local residents associations, knocking on people's doors, which I've done considerably over the last number of months, to try and get feedback and buy-in from them to the project, and them discussions are ongoing. Hopefully the Casement project will be an economic and social driver, not just for West Belfast and the entire city, and it's important that we sell that message.
And I would be confident that you can address all the concerns and come to a satisfactory conclusion.
Well, the GA is open to whatever we can do to address concerns. We have planning permission. We went through a statutory process, and we're hopeful now that we'll be on site by May time, but we'll do our best as much as we can to keep people who want to engage with us on board. We can't account for those that don't want to, but we are where we are.
Okay. Okay, we'll bring Mr Humphreys back in.
Can I ask you, Chris, in terms of the programme that you've set out for us here today, did you set that up as a standalone programme compared to other programmes and projects that the Ulster branch is working on?
Yeah, I think at the time, whenever we were working out how best to structure, particularly with so many staff coming in, whether we would set it apart from everything else that we're doing. And what we decided, and what we're very glad that we decided, is that we've integrated into all of our rugby development programmes. So we work on a regional basis, and the staff that we've brought in work across those 4 regions and support from a central point of view, and both also out on the ground. I think the key thing for us is that the objectives behind the programme are linked into what we're looking to achieve in terms of growing the game. So each part of the organisation is really there to mutually reinforce the other. And I think it would have been a mistake if we had said this is a decal programme and it works in isolation to everything else that we do. I think because the objectives are about growing the game, getting new participants, particularly amongst underrepresented groups involved, that it was key that that was all brought together. And I think the success of the programme has been as a result of that.
Claire, can I ask you, football would be the sport of the 3 that I would know most, and I'm a regular visitor to Northern Ireland games, and you mentioned Shankly United, and I want to commend Shankly United for the work they've been doing. I've been working closely with that club, in particular Mark Clegg, who's the full-time member of staff there. And I know they've got their club mark, and indeed we coordinated a sit-out for the Philippines before Christmas, and Shankly United, Woodvale FC, Shankle Juniors, Springfield Star all made contributions, but Shankly United are doing tremendous work, not just in the area of football, but in terms of working with unemployed young people as well, as you'll be aware. In terms of the IFA, I've been following on Facebook quite a lot the stuff that you were doing around health conferences, and I know that you've been praised very heavily and highly for that. Can you just explain to the committee exactly how that has worked out in practice?
In terms of the health programme, it was actually run by our marketing department. The health conferences, the health programme in general had quite a wide remit, and I'll just run through what that was. It was to deliver annual health conferences in areas that have high deprivation. We did that just last year in the Farset Centre in the Springfield Road, and had over 100 people who represented grassroots clubs from across Belfast and Northern Ireland participating in that. It's also to deliver annual mental health workshops, to deliver after-schools programmes, a health carousel in secondary schools, and first aid and defibrillator training. The health seminars have really been the most popular of all the health programmes that we have run, and it has taken in hundreds and hundreds of people from football clubs across Northern Ireland, coaches particularly, but also committee members and players. It's now transcended to a stage where we've launched this with the Irish Premier League. It's got so popular. Really what the aim of this is to bring people in from a grassroots level, from a domestic football level, and to educate them on what would be an appropriate diet for a young person going out to play football, what would be an appropriate set of warm-up, an appropriate cool-down. How do I identify mental health issues arising in young players? It's really to empower the volunteers and the coaches in particular. It's to build capacity for people to be able to take this learning back to their club and to develop their club in their coaching structures, in their administration of how they deal with these issues that are sometimes sensitive and sometimes are taboo. You know, how do you approach mental health? These seminars are a practical way of letting volunteers and coaches know that they can deal with this and that they can face this issue head on. It also provides them with practical tools such as handbooks, leaflets, poster campaigns, and also some equipment of a practical sense that will provide them with agility equipment to try and improve their coaching sessions. Quite often the grassroots clubs don't have a lot of equipment behind them, as opposed to perhaps a more wealthy club. So we will support them and provide them with agility equipment, with agility practical sessions to go and run out. So it's really focused on a multi-level, but in particular we have seen the progress and the sustainability developed with grassroots clubs who previously were going out on a Saturday and playing football, having a coaching session during the week, but now they're bringing in more aspects. They're bringing in healthy eating, they're looking at what should we be eating, they're having healthy breakfasts together, they're having pre-match meals, and they're tackling that really essential issue of mental health, which is really key for us and where we've seen quite a lot of improvement, and quite, as you say, Mr Humphrey, the commendation that we've had for the health programme and the mental health programme. So that's just a basic overview. It's done in an informal seminar setting, and we've had, I think, upwards of 40 of those seminars since the start of the funding.
Chair, you made mention about the defibrillator.
Yes.
President. I think that's tremendous, given the tragic loss of particularly young lives in both, presumably in all sports. I know there's been high profile in terms of GAA footballers who passed away, and that's something which is to be universally welcomed, and I welcome that as a concept. Can I ask all three of you, in terms of you've made mention of the fact that the funding is going to go in March 2015. If there was a second round of money that was coming forward, what would your respective bodies do with that money? And also then, if the funding isn't continued, what happens? Have you a plan B?
Yeah, I suppose from our point of view, our preferred option is that the funding is continued, obviously. I think from what we would look to do is to obviously build on the work that we've done, but also look to then maybe move into other areas that both GAA and IFA have been discussing here today around the mental health. So we see the area around health and well-being as being a key area moving forward. And I think it's maybe good to point out that the three sports sitting here together is not a regular occurrence. we work very closely together because a lot of issues are common across all three sports, and I think that there's a lot of shared learning between us, and we're very open to that. In rugby, we talk about that the only competition should be on the pitch, and that's realistically where it should be. But off the pitch, I think there's a lot that we can do together. So we can learn from the work that the other two sports have done through this programme. If the funding isn't continued, then we have to look at other sources of funding and probably look at prioritising where we would put the money into. The big aspect for us is that by having specific members of staff around areas of women's sport, around disability, that as a result of that very specific targeted investment, we've seen a growth in that. And if that investment's taken away, then we would obviously expect that that would fall away. So we would have to look at where we can get support, either within our own budgets or else looking to the IRFU from a central point of view as well, because it's tying in with their aims and objectives. So that would be our course of action.
At the moment, the Community Relations Department at the Irish FA is entirely externally funded. At the moment, the salary costs come majorly from Piece 3 funding, which ends in August 2015, as mentioned. I think that if this funding was to end in March 2015, it would be devastating for us because we've seen such a massive reach. Not only that, but a lot of people now have come to almost rely on the services that we're providing, such as the homeless, the long-term unemployed, drug and alcohol dependent, through our grassroots projects, but also those engaging in disability programmes. If we were to withdraw the funding and withdraw the programmes, that's a massive loss for the community. I think our contingency plan, and as Chris said, we do work very closely together and have been brainstorming together for such inevitabilities if it does happen. And I think we would come together and support the empowerment of women's programmes, as Chris was saying, also the support of disability programmes and of young leaders in sport, to really capacity build from the bottom up, to capacity build for volunteers. An avenue that we have been exploring together would be the Together Building United Community strategy, and have met together as a group to discuss that, and with a representative from DCAL to discuss the possible opportunities. However, that would perhaps change the direction slightly of this, as the focus would be on interfaith communities and things like that. But I do think that should this funding be taken away or changed drastically, it would majorly affect all three sports. As I think the other two representatives will agree with me today that we've seen an impressive reach already, and it's only really come to the end of year 2, and a lot of people's livelihoods are dependent on the funding. So, as I said, our next case would be to look at the OFM DFM and potentially Piece 4. Unfortunately, that has been drastically delayed now, and it's not coming out till early next year. So I think there is a real need for it. Another area, just if I could say briefly, that we would look to expand into would be capital bills across all three sports, and I think we'll agree, is that we now have a really wide reach and a lot of activity happen in a lot of different areas, and unfortunately our capital facilities at the moment don't reflect that and can't really house that as well as it possibly could. So we would maybe look to develop possibly joint partnerships moving forward in terms of capital build for grassroots organisations and grassroots clubs.
Well, Mr Humphrey, from our point of view, I'd say actually from the three sports, we represent 90% of sport participation in Northern Ireland. And we're a significant economic driver, the three organisations, and you can see that as a Northern Ireland fan yourself attending Windsor, or you can go to Ravenhill on a Friday night or come to any of our games at a weekend. You'll see a significant amount of people there. Sheffield Hallam University indicates that for every 1,000 people, for every 10,000 people that attend a game, it's worth about 1 million of economic footfall to the local economy. So between the three of us, we're driving a significant economic benefit to Northern Ireland and to its people. So we'll be arguing strongly to the Minister in that vein that this is a good investment, a good public investment. It's seeing a good return, and it's also having a contribution in areas of justice, in areas of health, and also reducing issues at grassroots level, community level, that all the people around the table will be only too aware of. From the GA's point of view, if we weren't to continue this funding, we will continue some of this work, but at a lower level. It wouldn't have the same level of reach, and we'd have to cut our cloth to meet our budget. But we would hope to try and maintain some of the work that's there, because it is very, very important work now, core work to what we're about. Though the core work is promoting games, this is a very, very positive spin-off from all of that. The final point I would make in terms of my organisation, we're putting together a new strategic plan up to 2020, and the areas that we're looking at is about increasing participation right across the board, disability, female in particular, using the two codes that we have within the organisation that play female sports, and looking at a wider reach right across urban areas. Capacity building is key to us, and as Claire mentioned, infrastructure as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Ms McKevitt. Yes.
Chair. I don't think I have much more questions to ask. A lot of it has been covered. But on, I suppose in the 10 years when Cormac McAllen has died, and what it has, the response from the community, not just through the GAA but also through the other sports, and the importance of that I have seen in communities, particularly the GAA, open up their doors, where communities come in and fundraised for the like of a DFib to be fought for a local club, and plus the training and plus the scanning or screening, should I say, of our youngsters. And I think it's very positive that you have all mentioned about sudden adult death syndrome and the importance of the DFib. The Minister for Health, or the Department of Health, has put out a consultation on CPR, and I was wondering to all three of you, have you responded to that consultation?
Well, from our point of view, we haven't. That's not to say that we won't. In terms of it, the public affairs staff are probably on it at the moment, and I'll check that out and come back to you, Ms McKevitt. But I think the point you make in terms of defibrillators is a very good one. The IFA have undertaken that programme, Rugby have undertaken the programme. Since Cormac McAllen died, every GAA club in Ulster, I'm proud to say now, has a defibrillator in place, and at least 6 members trained in the use of that defibrillator. In many cases, the defibrillator isn't held in the GAA club, it's held in the local post office, it's held in a central location, and we think that's a significant community opportunity. It also should be highlighted that Rugby has had a very significant and high-profile player die as well over the last number of years, and I think that the 3 governing bodies of sport have worked very closely on this. Claire's given an anecdote of a life that's been saved. I witnessed a referee's life being saved. So I think that this is something that we have done ourselves as sporting bodies that has contributed significantly to the community. And I think that it's an opportunity for all community groups to look at how we deal with CPR and how we deal with defibrillator use.
I personally haven't encountered the consultation, but I will refer back to the staff member who's taking care of the health programme and will respond.
We have a copy of the consultation which is out with our clubs at the minute, asking them to respond and to come back, and then we'll be clearing that on behalf of the organisation and sending it back in.
Chair, can we just check the closing date for that consultation? It's my understanding that it has already closed, and maybe if this committee could ask the Minister to consider late responses to it, or maybe they weren't made aware of it, so maybe we could do that just as a committee, because it is very, very important. Another thing that's come out, and Mr Humphreys touched on it, was the social media, and I was wondering through your programmes, I know it is to do with particularly for poverty, but it's also to do with good relations work. Have you any plans to introduce programmes through the social media, to get to outreach to those who aren't members of your clubs?
I think what all the governing bodies have very strong social media channels, and all the campaigns we would have are all promoted through our social media channels at the moment, and through our web-based channels and through YouTube and every other aspect we can do that. So, yeah, and I think it's important to say that in the defibrillator programme or in any of the programmes we have here, if a non-GAA member comes along and needs use of a defibrillator, God forbid, or needs some of these programmes, we're quite happy to share and have done so in the past. And I think Chris highlighted the important role that the 3 bodies are playing and collaborating with each other at the moment. On the pitch, obviously, we're vying for the people to play our games, but off the pitch, we don't put our arm around the homework. There's a significant amount of work going on between the 3 organisations and a lot of sharing of knowledge and ideas, and I think that's been very positive.
We've actually used some of the funds from the decal to invest in microsites for our website, which are interactive sites that are set apart from our website. So if someone clicks onto the Irish FA website and scrolls down, they'll see health as a microsite, and that will take them to all sorts of resources, downloads, posters that they can then take, learn for themselves. Also the same for volunteer and club development. So we have expanded ourselves in that capacity. We also, as Ryan says, have very active social media channels such as Facebook and Twitter, and we also have a closed Facebook group for young people who engage in our programme, so as they can continually have updates, but in a confidential, obviously, and child-protected manner.
Within the programme's parts funds programme promotions officer, and part of his role is not only just to highlight the work that's been going on, but to provide training to our clubs as well. And one of the things that we're very keen on is the whole development of social media, because our target audience in terms of young adults and young children, that's their main means of communication. So it's educating our clubs to say, look, if you're wanting to engage with new participants, this is how you have to do it. The channels are different. So we're very aware that that's a key aspect for us in terms of growing the game and growing the reach.
Chair, can I just take this opportunity to congratulate all three sporting bodies on the work that they're doing. And you can notice on the ground, and the point that was made earlier on, that when you join together, that's 90% of all sports or your sport users already touched on, and that extra 10% there to get those involved, it would be an easy task. So I congratulate all three. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. McRae.
Chair, if Mr. McMullen would like to go in front of me, I'm quite happy to give my slot. No.
Generous today.
No, I just no. Just wouldn't like to.
You're not worrying me about. Go ahead.
Thank you.
I listen.
So, first of all, Ryan, I thought your paper was rather good. Some interesting points on it. You might just tell me a wee bit about the Kilcullen Cup and the Game of Three Halves.
Well, thanks, Mr. McRae. The Kilcullen Cup is a programme which has been in play now since 2007, where essentially two controlled sector and two maintained sector schools will come together as one team representing a locality and play Gaelic games. Many of the kids from both schools will have never played hurling or Gaelic football before, and they get the opportunity to do that. It's based on the idea, particularly in hurling, where we have a very strong Ulster Scots dimension, because Shinty, or by the Camanachd Association run in Scotland, have very similar rules to hurling. And we already have an international match where the entire island, Ireland, plays against Scotland every year in a display match. And this idea was based on the fact that we would have kids from socially deprived areas, particularly urban areas, getting an opportunity from all backgrounds to play Gaelic games for the first time. That started off with the Belfast Cahullans in 2008, who travelled to America and represented Ulster in the World GA Youth Games in Philadelphia, and has been in play ever since. And we've gone from having 20 kids involved to over 400 kids involved, and we now have an annual Cahullin Cup, which takes place every year in Cookstown, and we have different teams represented. Belfast is obviously very strong, Armagh, Limavady, Foyle. There's a raft of people from right across the province that come and play Gaelic games as a team. The Enniskillen Cahullans were the winners last year, and they got an opportunity to travel to London to represent the GA at the ABC Games.
So, there's a couple of wee things I just want to pick up with, because it's interrelating on this. Chris, I don't want to drop you in it, and she may not know this, but I'm aware of Glenavy GAA working very closely with Lisburn Rugby Club, and I think actually they took the under-14s by storm in Andersonstown or whatever it is for the GAA. Do you know a bit about that? Can you tell me anything about that?
Yeah, I'm aware of it. I'm actually a member of Lisburn Rugby Club, so would follow it quite well. Again, I think it's part of the work that's been going on, where clubs have identified, other clubs and other codes that they can work with. It's coming at it from the point of view of building better community relations, but it's done in a very soft way. It's around the sport. I think the relationship with Glenavy came about because a couple of members from Glenavy actually played rugby at the club. We were also members of the local GAA club, so it was just that natural affinity there. There's also a link back to what we talked earlier on about the need for capital investment. A lot of it is being driven by the fact that there is not the same provision around, so clubs as they grow are looking at where else that they can come to and share facilities. And I suppose because the three sports are all based on field sports, that it's a very natural affinity. Take Lisburn Rugby Club, for example. Not only will they provide rugby, but there's also a football club use it for a training base, and Glenavy come down and use it as well.
Just I don't want to take too long. And Claire, I have a specific question on your presentation, so don't worry, you're not left out. But is there not? I mean, I was a bit surprised, frankly, first of all to hear from the paper from Ryan, and then obviously I knew about the Lisburn thing. Is there anything we can do about that a bit more structured? That it's not just a one-off. I do think it's a good thing for people can appreciate other people's sports, but obviously carry on with their own. Is it a flash in the pan, or is there more that we can do on that?
Well, I certainly am aware that from rugby clubs that there are a significant number of teams who would be bolstered by players who play Gaelic as part of their season and then come across and play rugby, and that's something that's happened naturally, and through relationships that people have within clubs. I think the key thing is that where you try to go in and force these things to happen, that's where the difficulty comes. It has to happen, I think, naturally and has to evolve. You mentioned earlier on about the game of three halves, and the game of three halves has been about providing an opportunity to try something different, for young people who maybe haven't had the opportunity to play one or the two other codes that are involved. So a lot of it is about providing opportunity and actually taking away some of the mystique. Because when young children in particular get onto the field and start playing games, they're focused on the sport itself. They don't really care about any other aspect of it.
Was that to bring in Claire, because she added at the end of her presentation there was a particular concern that you had, that there was, I know it wasn't strictly, I suppose, deprivation, but I think it was an anti-sectarian programme that you thought that there were some people were maybe at risk if there wasn't funding. Do you want to tell me a wee bit about that?
What I meant by that was we have our Peace 3 programme that we have at the moment, focuses on peace and reconciliation through sport, and is really about empowering people to talk about it, to talk about the issues. We go into football clubs and set up storytelling workshops where we invite perhaps older stakeholders in the club, older fans that maybe are at the sidelines every week and have amazing stories but don't get the chance to tell them, and bring in the younger stakeholders in the club, maybe from the youth academies, and tease out those issues of, well, what happened to the club back in the day? How did they come through difficulties? Do you have any stories that you want to tell us? It's really about developing appreciation from the youth for what the older people in the clubs have gone through and what the older people in the club have done for their club. What I meant by that was, there's 4 members of staff that are currently funded by Peace 3 to deliver that essential work in the community with young people, with football clubs, with volunteers. And come August 2014, that Peace 3 funding is ending, which means that those 4 members of staff, who also deliver a large portion of the DCAL funded work, will be essentially without employment if nothing else is secured in that time. That's what I meant by the risk. So there's staff members at risk who are delivering this essential work, particularly anti-sectarian initiatives, that would potentially not be able to do that anymore should August come and that ends.
So my last point is just to say to all 3 of you that I think the work that you do individually is magnificent. I have to say, just for the record, I'm full of support of where the GAA have moved to. In terms of reaching out to people, I know they've done it, but I also think that the IFA have made spectacular moves in this, and I suppose rugby, Chris, now actually fighting to make sure that you get equal share of resources for things going on, to make sure that you all do it. And so my last point to teach you is, I just get the sense, and I will finish on this, you say, so I just get the sense that you're all doing really good things, working together, but you're almost overachieving compared to what society is doing. And I just wonder about how you bring it a bit more into mainstream.
Well, I think it's a very good point, Mr McRae. And the first thing I would say is that the governing bodies sitting in front of you, I don't think have ever had a better relationship than we have at the moment. We're in contact on a daily basis. And our focus is about promoting our own sports, but we also understand the significant contribution we can play to society in general. And our 3 chief executives will be very much committed to that, and have given us a very loose rope in going ahead and engaging in that work. I think it would be remiss of me. Michael Boyd is in the room today, the Director of Football Development, or Coach Development within the IFA, who has been responsible for a lot of this work before any of us got involved in it, and really was a trailblazer in terms of the work that was done for Football for All in IFA, which led to a lot of the work that the 3 organisations are doing at the moment. But something simple in terms of the work we're at, just to give a quick anecdote. The night that we had at the end of the World Fire and Police Games, where we had a significant civil disturbance in the middle of the city, 400 kids were standing in Seaview in North Belfast, celebrating diversity, sharing in respect, playing rugby, playing football, soccer, playing Gaelic games. And that's where we want to move to, and that's the interface games that we're engaged in every year as part of the game of 3 halves. We also have a standing group that meets on an ongoing basis that we're all part of, that looks at how we can promote cross-community work. So I think there is a lot of work going on, but Chris made a very valid point. It's soft approach, because we don't want to put anyone in a position where they might be uncomfortable. So we'll continue with that work, and it will continue to grow, but we want to do it at a pace that people are comfortable with. The final point I'll make is, and we'll be pushing hard for this, in the review of public administration, it's very, very simple to build a shared pitch that the three bodies can use. A full-size GA pitch is 2 soccer pitches and a rugby pitch. That's in place in Limavady, it's in place in Cookstown. There's plans now for Belfast City Council to develop a few of these pitches, and that shared space in the truest sense, where people can come down, regardless of their sporting background, actually play on the pitch. And we hope that will be part of the new rollout of RPA. So.
Well, I think what you said is true, but I also think on another vein that we all have to get our own house in order, and we have to be ahead of the game. We have to be one step forward to have our resources, to have our staff, and to have our capability at the highest level that we can deliver it to the community. I don't think there'd be any point in us being on the back foot with this and being caught out. So I think what you said is true. We are ahead of society at the minute, but I think we have to be in order to deal with the issues that we come up against, and in order for us to have such a strong working relationship, I think we have to be in the front foot and have to.
A bit more funding, though.
Well, yeah.
We'll take it if it's come.
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt, but just at the point I'm making is I do think that all of you are doing fantastic work, but you're not quite mainstream in the funding and that for that aspect of what you're doing.
We do. I mean, we have a fundraising manager in-house, and her full-time role is to seek funding to continue this work. And it's something that we pride ourselves on, that we have received Piece 1, Piece 2 and Piece 3. We will be going for Piece 4, and we have already anticipated the delivery of the T-Book strategy in terms of funding. And again, it's why we're here today making a strong case of what we've done to hopefully move forward and hopefully continue working with DCAL in terms of delivering these projects.
Okay. Mr. McMullen.
Very quick. Can I congratulate the three of you on your programmes? But I would worry a wee bit about so many workshops and so many meetings. It's not really putting meat in the bones of what's out there. You could maybe be leading people up a path and filling them full of hope with meetings and workshops if there's nothing at the end of it, especially if funding was withdrawn. I think they've got to be empowered with the idea of having to go out and maybe getting something themselves, because if you keep giving people everything they want, then they won't go out to look for it, if you know what I mean. That community spirit, which is very important. But for example, in my own area, the local soccer team plays its home match. It's home match. 48 miles from home. That's his home match. Can't get any help. It's something you should be looking at, because my main thing here today is urban and rural, and it hasn't been touched on at all. It's okay talking about setting up all these things here, but you have a big problem. Setting things up in an urban situation is a lot easier than setting them up in a rural situation, and the logistics of it, everything involved in it. And I think maybe you want to take that on board, because of the rural white paper it's published, which states that, and with RPA there and with councils amalgamated, it could leave, for example, sports centres or community sports centres further away from communities, where there'll be councils will be amalgamated, and that's where the main parts will go. Go ahead, do you want to say?
Yeah, no, I'll pick up your point there, and I do appreciate that, and it's something that we have identified. We don't want to have any displacement or any lack of sustainability. What we do, our Club Mark programme in particular, there's a strain of that's called Club Education, and we go out and train football leagues. So there are many different football leagues across Northern Ireland, and we've trained 6 leagues at the moment, and those leagues then transcend down that training to their clubs. So at the minute we've trained 6 leagues who are responsible for 300 clubs. When those leagues go out, and these are rural, these are all across Northern Ireland, when those leagues go out and train the clubs under their jurisdiction, they can then get a training bursary so that we can fund them to go out and deliver those. So a lot of our, the health workshops in particular, it's about providing resources for people to be self-sustainable and to build capacity. As I say, we've done these all around Northern Ireland and have had a particular focus in rural areas. The Club Excellence Mark in particular, we have gone to clubs the whole way across Northern Ireland. We've had a particular interest from border areas. We spent a lot of time in Enniskillen working in that area. We know that that's been underrepresented by the Irish Football Association in the past, and we have made enormous efforts to drive forward and to bring sustainable and capacity building training. It's not just one-off, isn't this nice that we're down here doing training. We really want to focus on, and I do take your point that there has been and we hope that we would stop that initiative of, isn't it nice we're doing a programme here for these people. We want to really get in and to train people to deal with these issues personally and to take it out into their community and to develop communities.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And the other thing on disabilities, we run programs for disabilities, you know, in the 3 sports. But there is a percentage of those who are disabled who cannot take part because, you know, they may be mobile but they're unable to take part in your programmes. Those percentages are being left, you know. And I would encourage you in some way of looking at that. Should it be even come along and watch or do something, you know, so that they have a feeling of being involved even though they're not, as I say, on the field of play, you know. And also that would be a big help for parents to know that their child can take part even as watching or whatever, or something, or even holding the water bottle, you know.
I think from our point of view, Mr McMillan, we, within the GA, the Casement Stadium has been designed to be particularly disability friendly, and we've put that in play now with disability areas in all our stadiums and grounds. We allow people with a disability, who have a disability, particularly those who are wheelchair bound, into our games for free. And we do that to try and promote the idea that they could bring families along, because we allow a helper in as well on that, because it's exactly the point that you made. People can participate in our sports if they are of a certain level of capacity within a wheelchair, but if they don't, the only thing they can do is watch our sports. So the organisation has a policy that we let them into our games for free, and a helper along with them, and we have disabled areas. But I think it's important to highlight this. There's a lot done, but there's more to do in that regard, in terms of outreaching and ensuring that, regardless of somebody's physical or learning disability, that they feel part of a sporting body. So there's some work going on there, but there's still a lot more to do.
I'm just going to finish on that there, Ryan. If you go out there and contact the groups out there dealing with those people, they could short circuit a lot of your work for you and help you. And the very last thing is on defibrillators. Congratulate you all on going down that road there, you know, because we have a programme at home where we have defibrillators in every village, and we do that through the ambulance service, and we do that through the local GPs, and we get trained up to do all that there. It is vital to have that today, vital to have that today. Congratulations to you all, but what's the urban and rural side of things? No, there's a big, massive difference. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Hodgson.
Thank you, Chair. And again, folks, can I apologise? Actually, unfortunately, I had a necessity there to be missing during your presentations. And maybe I should declare an interest in it. I am a GA member and a club official. So I know that sport fairly well. And I'll touch maybe on some of the things, maybe, Ryan, that you have said since I came back in again. I think ourselves in North Derry have been pioneers very much in some of the stuff that has been rolled out since. And I remember
you and I would have no bias in that, Mr.
Absolutely none whatsoever. But I remember 15 years ago bringing a team of Scottish Presbyterian Gaelic-speaking shinty players from Inverary over to play a team of Irish, mostly English-speaking Republicans in North Derry in 2 games of shinty in 2 years running, and unfortunately that wasn't continued, but I think it laid the groundwork for perhaps the Cuhalan Cup and others, and certainly was a game of 2 halves and a very interesting week, 2 weekends actually, so it was. But we would like to repeat that in the wider field, and I know that GA games particularly have spread their wings far and wide in recent years. And I suppose that brings us on to the multi-sport services that you also touched on. And again, during my time in local government, I was very proud that we actually were able to deliver that one in Little Valley. That is multi-sports. Some people opposed it at the time. However, they are now some of its most ardent supporters, and I think that is an example of rollout right there across the board. The other one I want to touch on, because I think it's a sample of best practice, is what has gone on in South Derry between the Erin's Own Club in Lavey and the Cronahan Community Association. I think there should be a programme of work to try and encourage those type of partnerships across the board. They're not necessarily both sporting partnerships, but they are both community partnerships, and it has been hugely to everybody's benefit there. So I'd like to just maybe flag that up. And the only other point that I would like to bring up, because I say I will go through all your presentations afterwards here, and I know that I have been in touch, particularly with rugby, especially with GA, less so with IFA and all of that. But the only other thing we do want to bring up, my club was actually one of the very first clubs, and it was due to the largesse of the North Derry County Board's demise, maybe more than anything else, that we all got kitted out some 4 or 5 years ago with defibrillators. People have been trained up. My worry and concern is that, and I heard it articulated, it might have been yourself, Ryan, a number of weeks ago on the radio, that we have defibrillators maybe sitting around the country. Maybe when there's games on, there may or may not be somebody trained there. The pads might not be in place, the batteries might not be charged. Has that all been revisited in terms of, in all sports right across the board, to make sure that should the worst happen on the field of play or in the gym or wherever within the facilities there, that that situation won't develop, that somebody could lose their life because of poor equipment or out-of-date batteries and stuff. So that's just maybe that's just an overview, and I say again, apologise for missing your presentations.
I think from our point of view, we're at its longest in terms of, because we're replacing, we're getting to the stage now where we're replacing our defibrillators at the moment, because it's been 10 years since Cormac's death, and as a result of that, there was a significant boost at that time, and we're now at another cycle. So yeah, it is something we're looking at. First of all, retraining, replacing, and updating in terms of the defibrillators that are out there at the moment. The red guide, the safety guide, would indicate that for a match that's of significant size, we have to have doctors and ambulances there anyway, and they have defibrillators, and that's covered. But at games that might be smaller, 1,000 and under, we'd have a situation where we do have people that are trained there with the defibrillator. It did happen on one occasion where we had a situation, and I think maybe this is what you're referring to, Mr. Hassan, that we had a situation where there was a faulty defibrillator, but thankfully there was another one close by, which got the light bulb on, and we are now at a situation where we're looking at replacing our plant right across the province on that.
In fairness, Ryan, most games are 1,000 or less, so there isn't a requirement for an ambulance to be on site. It's only the larger championship games, particularly in GA, and I'm not so sure about the other sports, but most games will have less than 1,000 people. What about the partnership between clubs and community groupings?
Well, I know from my point of view that there's several out there. Lavy's one example. The Donaghmore District Community Association and the GA club down there work very closely together, where essentially the DDCA were leased the land that the GA had, and a shared campus was built on it. Where the GA are all 4 community organisations working together. I think the 3 governing bodies are working together very, very closely. We think municipal shared space is important, and I think it's important that while a lot of the 3 organisations here own their own land and own their own property, that there is an opportunity now during RPA to actually have sports campuses. For example, the Mid-Ulster Sports Arena has been a prime example of a shared space in terms of sport, where all sports are catered for and they're working together. That could be something we could look at and also link in with the community in the near future.
Well, listen, rather continue. Can I just wish it all well, actually, and thanks very much for your presentations.
Okay, I think that's everyone. Can I thank you very much for your presentation and for the level of cooperation that you do show in each organisation. And again, thank you very much for persevering in your presentation and the questions. The level of questions were quite lengthy, but thank you very much. Thank you. Should we write to the Minister in relation, members, to plans for to continue funding beyond 2015? Is that something whether you're happy with? Okay. Okay. Right. Moving on to correspondence at this stage. Members will find at page 355 correspondence from the Committee for Finance and Personnel regarding outstanding post-project evaluations. Can we seek members' agreement to ask DCAL for an update on these outstanding post-project evaluations? Okay.
Can we actually have it specifically? What are the outstanding?
Clark, yeah,
okay. That'll be clarified.
Okay. At page 364, members will find further correspondence from the Finance and Personnel Committee, including Garney UK Trust report on measuring wellbeing. Again, can I seek members' agreement to forward to the Department for more information on that? Okay. Members will find in their table pack to page 22 a copy press release issued by Ofcom in the new arrangements for Channel 4's licence. Members content to note.
Chair, can I just highlight that Ofcom will be writing to the committee specifically because the committee had contributed to this.
Okay. Sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Andre.
I just say that there is, we have Ofcom up, there is still areas that are still badly covered for signal, for broadband, for all of that there, and broadband Ofcom are coming, that should be brought to their attention so they can bring information to any meeting before they come. They have contacted me, I'm meeting with them shortly on it, and it's still a big problem out there in rural areas.
Chair, can I just also mention that in the media quite recently, it has been reported that there's a possible closure of the BBC Three channel, which would give a lot of coverage on the cultural and arts end, and maybe if we could raise that at a future meeting with Ofcom and or whoever needs to know concerns around that.
Okay. Yeah, members will find in their table pack page 24 summary of the North-South Language Body Equality Scheme. Members content to note that. Chairperson's business. The next item on the agenda of Chairperson's business, members will find the invite tracker at page 402, providing a list of current invites. Please let the staff know if you'd like to attend any event schedule. Forward work programme. Forward work programme is at page 405, and again I'll invite the clerk to speak on this.
Chair, we haven't made any significant changes to that, but I just do want to flag up the visit to Strangford Lough and Lough Cowie on the 27th of March. We'll be sending an email out to members early next week looking to see who's going to be able to attend that. The basic programme, if I boil it down, is there would be, this is following on the back of the ADSI presentation to members about bringing Lough Cowie back into play as a sea trout fishery. But what we also want to do is actually go out on Strangford Lough to look at the areas where ADSI have identified potential for increased angling tourism. So we would do that first, then we would visit the Lough Cowie site. So we'll be coming out to members with a more detailed itinerary for that, including times to seek numbers of how many people will be able to attend that. That's on the 27th of March, not next week, but the week after.
Okay, members happy with the forward work programme? Everyone in agreement? Okay. Any other business? Do members have any other businesses? Mr. Murphy?
Thanks, Chair. Chair, I'm not over the detail on it, but because of our remit, I suppose, in matters cycling, the Giro and the Velodrome and all the rest of it, and I suppose the interest that maybe some members of the committee have in that, it's my belief that the Cycle to Work scheme has now been extended to members, and I'm wondering could we maybe get an update on that, just because I believe the closing date is the 28th of March, and just if there is anybody that would be terribly interested in that, like, you know, I think it's a great.
Are you going to do it?
Well, if you do it, Basil, I'll do it.
Right. All right. We'll talk about it. I'm actually interested in that. I've actually almost bought a bike, but I haven't.
Well, I almost bought a bike yesterday, and that's why I'm just. But I would like maybe to make other members aware of it. So just.
That's really good.
Clerk will get the permission on that. That's okay.
Is there a motor on it?
You're on.
I looked at it.
Okay. Date and time of the next meeting. Okay, everyone. Okay. The next committee meeting is scheduled for 10 a.m. on Thursday, 20th of March, in room 21, Parliament Buildings. At the meeting, the committee will receive the first briefings for the inquiry from the Arts Council and Arts and Business NI. Arts and Business will also brief the committee on corporate sponsorship in the arts. Okay. That is all the business, and can I put it to the committee that the committee is now adjourned? Okay. Thank you very much.